Okay, it's 7 o'clock and I'm going to call the meeting of Middleton Plan Commission for September 28th, 2021 to order. And the first item, Abby, is the roll call.
Bruce,
Here.
Erdman Hermans,
Gretchen,
I saw her on the call earlier. There she is. Let me see if I can ask to unmute her.
Sorry, guys. It was stuck. I'm here. Can you see me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Paulson,
Here.
Ramsey,
Here.
Schaefer,
Here.
Slavish,
Here.
and Brar is present.
all right, so everybody here, it's 7 o'clock and I'm going to call there's a public hearing. This is the request to amend the general implementation plan pertaining to 20-acre parcel directly east of 6043 Unken Road. So I'm calling that public hearing to order. So anybody who wants to speak, please raise your hand. You will be recognized in the order you raise your hand. You have to identify yourself and you have 3 minutes. And Mark, before we go, do you want to give a very short?
Yeah, I think that'd be helpful. Thank you, Mayor. First of all, my apologies on behalf of the city for the cancellation at the last meeting. I had made an error with the Zoom login information, and so I appreciate your patience with us as we, both the public here and the applicant, as we rescheduled it for this meeting. What we did in advance of this meeting is we sent out the public hearing notice with the updated Zoom login information for this meeting. And we sent that to all the people to whom we had sent the original hearing notice. And we announced at the previous meeting that was canceled, all who were in attendance were made aware that the hearing would be scheduled for this evening. So we feel that the notice has been properly given. All the testimony that we had received for the last meeting in writing is included in your packet, and we received a couple additional items of communication, and those are included in that compilation as well. Since that canceled meeting, the applicant has submitted a slightly revised plan, which converts the funeral home to a park shelter. Thank you, Daphne, for displaying that. So it has converted the funeral home to an open air park shelter space with a parking area adjacent to it. So that is the primary change to the substantive change to the hearing that was published in the paper. And in my view, this is still compatible with the GIP amendment, the General Implementation Plan amendment. So that's all I have, Mayor, as an introduction before we proceed with accepting public input.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So Thomas Culp, you have your hand up. So please identify yourself and you have 3 minutes. I'll be able to take track of the time. And others who want to speak, please raise your hands. Thank you.
Hi, Tom Culp. I'm a Middleton resident. I live within about 2 miles of the site. I'm also the consultant for True North. I'm a True North environmental consultant. I'm the consultant for T-Wall on a number of projects. I've looked at this site in the past and evaluated the geotechnical report that's referenced. And I've driven by the site for the last 30 years on my way to work. I've seen the changes in the site from it being filled at the end of its life cycle in 95 or so. I'm in support of the use that's proposed. There's a similar property across Onken Road from this that was a quarry, had similar types of fill used in it. And the county seemed that it was appropriate to use that as a phosphorus stockpiling site. So it looks like this proposed use is better than that. Guess that's all I have.
Mayor, you are muted.
Anyone else who may want to speak at this time, please raise your hands. I do not see any raised hands. I do not see any raised hands. Does
Yeah.
anybody else want to speak?
Terrence and Madeline have their hands raised.
Okay, Terrence and then Madeline. Terrence, please go ahead.
Hi, so I'm with the community of Bishops Bay and the Wisconsin Foundation, and we're proposing this natural burial preserve. So it was zoned for 2 schools, and it was previously quarried. So it's not really a good spot to build houses on. And so instead we're proposing this natural burial cemetery, which is much different than traditional cemeteries. Traditional cemeteries are really bad for the environment. They create a lot of pollution with the formaldehyde and the concrete and metal that goes into the soils. And with a natural burial preserve, there is no embalming, there is no concrete or metal allowed. So there will be no above ground structures, no, vaults or mausoleums. All the headstones will be flat to the ground. And a lot of people will actually choose to use a tree or a plant instead of a headstone. So you really won't be able to see anything when you drive by. It won't look like a traditional cemetery. And yeah, it's a lot better for the environment. It's a nice, peaceful, quiet use for the land, and people will be able to use the walking paths. And yeah, that is kind of our presentation for the natural burial preserve.
Thank you, Madeline. Anyone else? Okay, so I see Terrence Wall and then Craig Kurtz. Terrence, go ahead, please.
Yes, hello, this is Terrence Wall with Bishops Bay and the Wisconsin Foundation. I just want to comment on some misinformation that's been presented out there. This site was a quarry, a rock quarry. It was filled with dirt. They were allowed to have some crushed concrete or crushed asphalt, chunks of that, and wood product. The backfilling of the quarry required a license. That license is called a landfill license. So the word landfill, as we all know, has bad connotations and implies that it's a garbage landfill, which it's not. They had to get a landfill license, and they filled the quarry with dirt, except, as I said, with some other things like concrete or asphalt or wood. The site was not compacted, so it's not appropriate for housing, because in order to build a house, you would have to spend an extraordinary amount of money to stabilize the foundation and prevent the house from settling. There is a large pile of dirt on the site, on a part of the site. That is good fill material that we are temporarily storing there. We intend to use that material in construction of the remainder of Bishops Bay over time. So that pile will go away eventually. Tom Culp, our environmental consultant, has been involved in the site since day one. We first got approvals in 2007 through 2012, took about 5 years. Those approvals specifically allow, and specifically in very specific words, allow us to make changes and amendments to our overall plan. City Council agreed to that when this development was launched, because we all recognized that it was going to take a long period of time to develop property and that things would change over time. The original proposal on the plan was for 2 schools. One was intended to be public and one was potentially private, with a playing field, track and field in the middle between the 2 schools. The public schools of Wanakee, which this resides, have decided they're going to go to another site they already have for their next school, and they don't see a need for this site. We'd previously proposed the Lutheran Church and their private school to go in this location. The city said they would prefer that it go in a different location, so it was located over on Highway M. We did an amendment to the MDP to do that. We have achieved bringing in 2 schools to the development area. So the Inspire Preschool, which has the exotic animals, and also the Lutheran Church and its private school are now on site. The Lutheran school will open up here in the next few weeks. That leaves this 20-acre site available for another alternative use. We chose a benign use. Obviously, if 2 schools here are here, there would be hundreds of cars dropping kids off and picking them up twice a day. Lots of buses, dozens of buses in and out of the property. Tall poles with lights to light up the track and field. Everything you would find with a school, or 2 schools in this case. So this proposal is a very benign use. It's basically a park. You'll be able to, residents and neighbors will be able to walk on these paths. When it's completely done, it will become, well, it will be eventually again like a park. So it'll be a long-term use as an open space for the public. The property will be covered with trees and other plants that people plant instead of having a flat tombstone. Many people choose a plant or a tree to mark the location. This is a great use. It's a benign use. There's no adverse effects on the environment. There's no adverse effects on the neighbors. We did make one additional change because of the adjacent neighbor to the west, recognizing that house right there. We did add a 50-foot buffer there, which we'll landscape with arborvitaes and other materials, to create a buffer between that house and this use. Although again, this is a benign use. Most of the time when families are burying a loved one, it's done, with a very small group of just immediate family. The bicycle path that we put in links the future park to the west to the future park to the east. There are linear parks on both sides. So we want to make a bicycle path connection through to those 2 parks. And again, of course, you can walk on all these paths. The property is suitable for this use and is an appropriate amendment to this plan, and it really adds additional open space to Bishop's Bay. Our overall plan calls for, I think it's over 50% of our entire development to be open space and parks, but this would be in addition to that. So a major public benefit. Admittedly, there have been a few people who have complained. Those people live well over a half a mile away in the back 9 neighborhood. I recognize that it's human nature to move into a neighborhood and then try to pull up the ladder and not let anyone else in or any other use. Those people were told in their offers to purchase, in their documents that were recorded with their deed restrictions, that this development will continue and be ongoing for years, and that there may be changes. In fact, there will be changes, it says, and that they are forewarned and disclosed to them. And they agreed in their acquisition of their lot. They agreed that they would not try to claim that they didn't know or they weren't aware that there would be changes or continued ongoing development of this property. We all know this will continue for the next 10 or 15 years.
Mayor, Terrence, just really quick, this is still the public hearing, and I wasn't sure if we were giving the developer an opportunity to make the full presentation during the hearing, or if you wanted to wait for that.
Yeah, so it's beyond 3 minutes, Abby, then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
So-
done, if that helps.
Okay,
But
thank
I
you.
apologize. I didn't know either, Abby, so I appreciate you letting us know what to do here, because I wasn't sure what to do or when.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Terrence. So
Okay.
the next one is Craig Kurtz, and then Michelle, after that, Michelle Bartholomew. Craig, go ahead, please.
Yes, Craig Kirch, resident in the area.
Could we ever
Madeline,
add,
you touched.
Could we have your address for the record, please, Craig?
Sure, 5180 Ziegler Road, Wanakee.
Thank you.
Madeline, you had mentioned that there will be reduced pollution because there won't be caskets and embalming chemicals, and that's true, but there are still a lot of contaminants leaked into the soil from the body decomposition process. Potentially nasty things, viruses. There's homes in the area with wells drinking water. The lake is not far away. So what's going to be done to ensure that the wells and other areas aren't contaminated by this?
Okay, well, you have 3 minutes, so is that it or you have more to say?
Oh, that's all for now.
Oh, okay, thank you, Craig. So the next one is Michelle Bartholomew.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. And so I live at 4413 Black Wolf Run, and I understand based on Mr. Wall's commentary that perhaps my questions don't matter. But I just have 3 questions. I don't actually need all 3 minutes. The first one is there was mention of it being like a park. And so I guess I'm wondering why it isn't a park. The second question is, how is the burial operation going to be regulated and operated? Is there a business that's coming in? Are there different rules? It kind of pertains to the questions that the previous gentleman had asked. And my third question is procedurally, I guess I'm a little confused. It sounds like we first heard that this place was being proposed as a park, and then we heard from someone who had talked about the location being appropriate as a park, and now there's a proposal that it's going to be a burial ground. And so I'm just trying to understand procedurally what's happening next. Like, is there going to be a vote? Like, if someone can clarify those things, that would be helpful.
Okay, thank you. So now, Abby, we don't do that in this public hearing part, right? So that will come later. Okay, anyone else who may want to speak at this time? Anyone else?
JC has their hand raised.
JC, okay.
Name
Okay,
and address
JC,
for the record, please.
please go ahead.
Oh, I'll ask to unmute. Okay, JC,
Can
you
you
have
read-
3 minutes. Name and address for the record, please.
Craig Malum, 4416 Black Wolf Run, Middleton, Wisconsin. And I'm not sure if I'm correct on this, but it looked like there was an ordinance in Middleton that a cemetery has to be 20 acres if it's not run by a religious organization. And I'm just wondering, with the addition of the parking spaces and the pavilion and other structures there, the actual cemetery space looks like it would be less than 20 acres. So is this even a legal application of being able to put a cemetery in this space? And I have another concern, like the previous person, you're going to have thousands of pounds of decomposing human material there. What does that do to well water in the area? What does it do to the water table in general? And I just think it's a poor use of the land when you promise there could be a school or a church and you convert that to a cemetery. And that's all I had to say.
Thank you, Joseph. And anyone else who may want to speak? And JC, you can please lower your hand, and Craig, you too. Anyone else who may want to speak at this time?
I had another comment. I raised my hand again.
Yeah, please
Craig.
go ahead. Go ahead, Craig.
Thank you. Just wanted to also mention that, cemetery impacts value of homes and land. So wondering what's being done to consider how neighboring homes are impacted by that. And one additional piece is just the communication around this has been, I'd say, inconsistent. Not sure if I'll be informed with a letter next time that this is happening. I received one letter in my mailbox that was just dropped off, not through the postage. This meeting I was not notified of. So just curious how that's being rolled out.
Thank you. Yeah, this was published in the newspaper. That's the regular procedure. So thank you. Constance Royko, you are next. Please unmute yourself and 3 minutes. Constant Royko,
I just sent her an unmute request.
okay.
Hi, Constance Brico. I'm
What's it?
67 Unkin Road, and I'm one of the 3 homes right next to it. And I pretty much have the same things that I'm worried about that Craig Kurtz said. And I feel that we are not sure that this is what's going to be what it shows, because it's very inconsistent. I mean, it's one day the cemetery, the next day it's a park. Are they just putting this through to get this through? I'm worried about the water and the land of our homes. The resale value. I'm not real thrilled with it.
Thank you, Constance. Now you are the west of this site on Akan Road.
I'm sorry?
You are on the west of this site, right? I normally I go and look at this. I didn't have a time to go and see.
I am the west of that.
Oh,
The
okay.
third from what he wants to do.
Okay. Thank you so much. Anyone else who may want to speak at this time, please raise your hands. Anyone else?
Terrence has his hand up, but he's gotten 3 minutes, as has Thomas Cole.
Yeah.
While we wait for other people, I want to enter into the record, Mayor, the written comments that we received.
Okay.
They are from Jamie Spollinger,
Okay.
6043 Onken Road.
Okay.
James Goetz, Goetz, no address given. These are all in your packet, by the way. Heather Catterson, also not clear if there's an address. Oh, there, I'm sorry, that's 4922 St. Anne's Drive. Alex Cummings, I don't see an address there. Rachel Svaznica, and that address is also not indicated. Christopher Reed, who provided a couple statements, no address given. But most of these people are residents of Bishop's Bay from the context of their communications. They're residents who live south in the city portion of Bishop's Bay. Jennifer Reckner, who lives at 4420 Back 9 Drive. Tessa McComer, resident of Bishop's Bay. Luke Wolf, no address provided, but appears to be a resident of Bishop's Bay. And then we also received comments from Hamid Imamaku, pardon the pronunciation, 4420 Back 9 Drive, and Elizabeth Rana, no address given. So those are the comments that were provided prior to the hearing and prior to this meeting. And in terms of notification, I did want to clarify that we did notify property owners within 200 feet. The individual who said he didn't receive a notification lives over 2,000 feet from the property, and that's why they didn't get a direct mailing from the city.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Now, Thomas, you have your hand up. You already spoke, so I guess so that is.
Mayor?
Yep.
We do typically allow the developer to address, questions and comments during a presentation. Would it be all right for Terrence to make some additional remarks since we had to cut him off in the public hearing?
So, okay, so you mean close the public hearing and then, or right now?
Yeah, I think that would be best. Is there any, see if there's anybody else who wishes to speak. Maybe
Is there anyone else who may want to speak at this time, either in favor or against it, and who hasn't already spoken? Is there anyone else who may want to speak either in favor or against this proposal who hasn't already spoken? Okay, so the last call, anyone who may want to speak at this time who hasn't already spoken, this is your time.
All the comments
Okay.
we received in writing were in opposition, by the way.
Okay. Okay, I don't see any raised hands, and I'm going to close this part of the public hearing, and we are going to go to item number 1. This is the approval of the minutes, Plan Commission minutes of August 24th, 2021. Do I have a motion to approve?
I move to approve, Paulson.
Need a second?
Bruce, second.
Okay, so the motion by Commissioner Paulson and second by Commissioner Randy. Any questions or comments, corrections, anything on the minutes? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to approve the Plan Commission minutes of August 24th, 2021, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? So the motion passes unanimously. We are on to item number 1. Under the agenda item, this is the request to amend the general implementation plan pertaining to 20-acre parcel directly east of 6043 Anken Road. So, Mark, do you want to take this first, or should we just let Terrence? I would ask him to address. Yeah, you are the one who wrote the comments. Do you want to go through this?
Yes, Mayor, I'd be happy to.
Okay, sure.
I said a fair amount earlier, and I'm just looking for my packet now, which I've misplaced in my screen. Just bear with me a moment, please. Here it is. So in your packet, our staff comments describe the master development plan for the neighborhood, which serves as the GIP, the General Implementation Plan for the community of Bishops Bay. And that did not list either a cemetery or funeral home as either permitted or conditional use of this lot, which is zoned neighborhood civic. Hence, we directed the applicant to amend the GIP, to request this amendment to the GIP. As I mentioned earlier, they replaced the site plan that was in your packet for the canceled meeting with one that shows the open air park structure instead of a funeral home. And the summary of the comments that we had received, which I noted during the public hearing, and which you heard during some of the comments tonight, they could be summarized as foregoing the opportunity to have a school on this site could set the stage for more changes to the master plan. That was one concern. There's a concern about property values and hindering resales. Another theme is negative impact on the environment, especially groundwater. Someone also mentioned bird habitat. There was a concern about requiring long-term maintenance of the cemetery property. Also locking in the use of the property. In other words, cemeteries rarely convert to other land uses in the future. And also the concern that this is setting a precedent for establishing a cemetery in a residential area. What I indicated in our staff comments is that, to our knowledge, the Waunakee School District does not plan to site a school on this property, or for that matter, anywhere in community of Bishops Bay. And it is not uncommon for cemeteries to be located in residential settings. For example, next to churches, we have a couple of those in Middleton already. So what we advised is that you consider the public input you got in writing and at the meeting tonight. We acknowledge the concerns that have been raised, but from a planning staff point, we didn't have any objection to the GIP amendment. I would note that the city's comprehensive plan adopted in March identifies this area as parkland, future parkland, envisioned as parkland. And so when you look at the adopted GIP, which identified civic uses, and the comprehensive plan, which identified parkland, we're not quite sure why there's that apparent discrepancy, but we feel that a cemetery still falls between those and is consistent, suitably consistent with both. And I'll leave it at that for now as my background, and then you may wish to have the developer address some of the issues that
Okay.
were.
Okay, thank you. So Terrence, do you want to address some of the concerns which the various constituents have raised, and anything else which you may want to present at this time?
Sure, thank you. I wrote all the concerns down, but if I miss one, please feel free to let me know. I'll go through quickly, so I won't take up too much time. One, we are allowed to make changes. It's in the original approval. I'll point out that we've already made numerous changes to the overall master plan and development of the community of Bishops Bay. This is not going to set a precedent because we've already made numerous changes. Number two, recall, for those of you who weren't involved originally, Lucille Taylor Park and Highway Q, which is in the community of Bishops Bay, was an illegal landfill and contained actual real contamination, including barrels of bad stuff. We cleaned that up and we filled that, capped it all in accordance with DNR standards. And today that is a public park. So, we had a really bad situation over there and we turned it into a positive. Here we have an old quarry site. It is not contaminated. It was filled according to DNR rules, and we're turning it into a real positive, real benefit. Across Onken Road, the county created a pond where they pumped phosphorus dredgings from Dorn Creek into that holding pond up at the top of the hill, which is right along Onken Road, across and next to the homes that are in the town of Westport. So that is actual contamination sitting in a pond that is sometimes wet and sometimes nearly dry. And obviously the county felt that that was a safe thing to do. We're not even close to that. But obviously if that is not contaminating, the groundwater or Dorn Creek, certainly this won't. Next point was somebody asked about state rules. There are state rules on this, so we will have to follow those, and DNR rules will have to be followed. The next point is this was never proposed as a public park. It was shown as schools or institutional. Institutional could have been church or schools or something like that. Next point is we're already ahead of our parkland dedication, so we're way ahead of what's required. And as I said, over 50% of Bishops Bay will be parks or open space. The next point is somebody talked about impact on values, real estate values or home values. By living next to a cemetery, I have a master's degree in real estate valuation from the #1 school in the country. And I can tell you that there are many buyers of homes that like to buy near a cemetery because it's like open space. It's a park. You can walk in it. You can walk your dog through there. They like that. It keeps the view open. There are trees. It's quiet. It's a benign use. The next point was about communications. Even though we are not required to, we sent out emails to all of the HOA, the Bishops Bay HOA members. We sent out a hard copy letter, and we included in the letter the homeowners along Onken Road, just to make sure that everybody was communicated with. There's been all kinds of chatter on social media, just from a small group of a handful of people. So it's not like anybody was surprised about this. Lastly, there's another point, and that is that this was a quarry, which means there was rock. And there's a plate of rock at the bottom where the fill is. So if there was any concerns about contamination, it would take a decomposing body would decompose, and then there's 50 feet or so of fill before you hit a plate of rock. Obviously, animals die and decompose all the time on the surface of the ground throughout this property right now. There's all kinds of animals. The bear was here once, there's deer. But that's happening all around us all the time. But this is a opportunity for the Middleton and our community to set the pace and set the standard, to get away from traditional cemeteries that are harmful. Embalming fluids are harmful. Cremation is harmful to the environment. This would only be the second one in the state of Wisconsin, Maddie. Yeah. So this is really going to set the pace. I think, you get this established, you'll find that all cemeteries will eventually have to convert to this type of cemetery because it's so much better for the environment than a traditional cemetery. So I think you've got an opportunity to present a very sustainable and green option here to enhance the community, enhance Bishops Bay. Maddie is going to comment. She's got something specific on some research and studies that we've been doing on this for the last few months.
Sure. So the Green Burial Council, which is an international group that certifies these types of cemeteries, they have lots of articles with information. One of them is called The Science Behind Green and Conventional Burial. And they have quoted the Pan American Health Organization as saying, quote, "There's little evidence of microbiological contamination of groundwater from burial," end quote. And then that article also goes on to say that no contamination has been reported from or near any green cemeteries in the US, Canada, Great Britain, or Australia since their inception in 2003. So a lot of contamination you might be concerned about is going to be from formaldehyde or embalming. And again, that is completely banned in this type of cemetery. There's no embalming, no metal, no concrete. Most people will be wrapped in a simple cloth and just buried into the ground, which eliminates a lot of that contamination.
Lastly, we'd add that according to our environmental consultant, there are 3 septic fields in the homes that are adjacent this or near this property, not adjacent, but they're on Onken Road. It's those old septic fields found in these kinds of locations that are a real threat to the environment and a real threat to contaminating groundwater. And that is not the case with our proposal here. So when homeowners speak up about concerns about contamination, it's their own septic systems that are really at risk. And really, if you want to solve that, they would need to replace those septic systems or attach to municipal sewer. But this is not going to cause contamination. So that's just false information. So if I missed anything, let me know. Hopefully I move through quickly. Thank you.
Yes, so Dennis and Marilyn, I have one question that one of the emails mentioned about and gave several references about various microbial, bacterial contaminations. And Madeline, you mentioned that you have some references where you found that there isn't any evidence. I just want to know that if you had a chance to look at any of the references quoted in that email. I didn't really go and dig into it, but I wonder if you had an opportunity that if you could, tell us whether that email misquoted that information, or what do you know about it?
Sure. So the article I was talking about was called The Science Behind Green and Conventional Burial. And again, that can be found on the Green Burial Council. Their address is, or their web address is just thegreenburialcouncil.org. And again, they have lots of different articles they've written. And the one I was talking about said that there's little evidence of microbiological contamination of groundwater. They have about 25 different sources in this article, so I won't go through and list them all, but if you'd like to read it, you can find it on their website. They, again, like I said, have lots of great information about these types of cemeteries.
Okay. So you didn't really have a chance to look at that email and those references that person quoted, right? Or did you?
Well, we read some of the emails, but Tom Culp, if you want to comment, but again, I will just say that there's a lot of misinformation being presented out there, on Facebook and in these emails. And I really don't want to have to get into, being direct at any individual person who's, misinforming here. We have the facts right here from the Green Burial Council. There's no risk of any contamination. This is probably going to win an award for the community and for Middleton. Because it's a fantastic green, sustainable use for the property. And frankly, it's a lot less of it's benign, versus having 2 schools there with hundreds and hundreds of cars and buses in and out of there all day long, and bright lights and potentially noise from playing football on, Friday nights or whatever, you know what I mean? So this is an award-winning opportunity here for the community, and it's fits in perfectly with everything that we're doing in Bishop's Bay.
Okay, thank you. So now the public hearing part of this is over, but I'm going to ask, there's one person who has specifically mentioned about viral or bacterial contaminations. If that particular person would want to elaborate on that one. So I'm making one exception, but otherwise this is not a public hearing now. Was that a Jace? I guess the name of that person was, yeah, I don't know. You probably know who you are. So you mentioned that you had some evidence that some of the viral or bacterial contaminations from some of these burial sites could go into water. Does anybody know who this was, Abby? Do you know?
I'm looking at the comments we got received were from Craig Kirch, Michelle Bartholomew, who had 3 questions. Craig Malum, I think is who maybe you're referring to. He asked about decomposition, what does it do to well water? And Constance Royko worry about groundwater and resale value, but I don't recall anyone specifically during their testimony citing, well, it was Tom Culp who talked about geotechnical, and Terrence just referred to him. Is that who you're referring to, Mayor?
No, I just, well.
I mean, the hearing is closed.
Okay.
I think for future, what we could do in the future, just talking out loud here, is maybe what we should do for future hearings is if there's questions of any of the speakers during the hearing, that would be a time to ask them.
Okay.
But to get into a back and forth is problematic, I think, from a legal standpoint.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So the Kurt Paulson and then Randy Bruce.
So I have a list of 8 questions here, so maybe I'll just ask 1 or 2 and then I can circle back if Randy has a question. I guess we'll just start with that groundwater question. So more of a question for Mr. Brengel, Terrence's attorney. Will a burial or cemetery like this require a groundwater permit from the DNR?
At this point, we've talked briefly with Tom. As I see it from a legal standpoint, before we expend significant sums of money on this use, I want to ensure that there's support from the city and from the town of Westport as well at a GIP amendment level. I think that this could be addressed at the SIP level, which is typically, once we have some buy-in as far as, that we're headed in the right direction. Again, this is very early. As Terrence noted in an email to several of the council members, I believe, typically in the multifamily realm, which is about 80% of the work that I do for T-Wall, almost all of our sites that we encounter in Dane County have some contamination. We're very thorough in remediation efforts and coordination with the the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources on getting all appropriate permits, filing material management plans, et cetera. And I think that that's the route we will go. But again, before I spend, thousands of dollars with True North Consultants, who Tom works for, I want to ensure that, we're not wasting money because, and again, it's always unfortunate with Bishop's Bay, but there's such a history with this project. It's just 2 years ago that we were in front of this very body asking for approval for the church to go here. And we spent a lot of money, I don't want to say wasted, designing, engineering this site only to get denied or recommended that we move over to County Highway M.
Okay, so yeah. So I think people would want to know, and it's a matter of interest to the commission as well. But of course, just for the public's benefit, we're only dealing with the land use and the zoning issue here. Whether or not it has a groundwater permit for those issues, that's a really something to be addressed at the level either of DSPS or DNR. But I was just wondering if you knew if it required a permit. And related to that, the three houses just to the west are still in the town, but your parcel and then Ziegler's parcel and then your parcel, again, moving west, are all in the city. Maybe you don't know, or maybe Tom Wilson knows, is there a plan that eventually those three parcels would be annexed into the city? It somewhat relates to the issue of water and sewer up there because those are currently on septic, right?
Tom, is that something you could speak to?
Or Mark?
From a city planning
Mark, yeah.
standpoint, there is no plan, or the master development plan for Bishop's Bay specifically excluded those three from the GIP. So there's no, obviously because they're not in the city, and we're not aware that, we don't have any requests for annexation, and we don't anticipate any in the short term.
And they were not a part of the utility district that we established with Westport and Middleton for this project and some of the surrounding properties, because those properties opted out of our development plans.
I am here if anyone's interested. Yeah. Mayor, are you interested in Wilson's perspective here?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'd love to hear Tom Wilson.
Yes. You are so wonderful. So all I would say is there was no intent to annex those three properties to the city. However, I believe the intent was that they could connect to water and sewer should it become available. So that may answer your question about concerns over well water contamination or the concerns over septic that I've been hearing. But at the same time, we got to get we got to get city water and city sewer there before that happens, because that's what they could connect to. There was no intent to have certainly the town's water system there. It's a long way away. And the town sewer system, although close, is not what we talked about for our connection. So,
and the back 9 is all on water and sewer, right? It's not on well.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
You're talking about phase 5 in the town over by M. That's all on. It's city water. And the town is the customer. And it's on town sewer.
And for clarification for the record, for anybody who doesn't know, that is Tom Wilson, who's the town Westport administrator.
Yes, and I'm here. Thank you.
So he's staff to the Middleton Westport Joint Zoning Committee along with me.
Thank you.
And we'll just note a couple of members of the town of Westport board are here with us today too.
Yeah.
I'll stop and let Randy ask his question.
Randy, go ahead, please.
Sure, thank you. I've got a couple of questions. I'm going to start by asking one for Mark Opitz. Did I understand correctly that the comp plan, the recently adopted comp plan, designated this as parkland?
Yeah, I don't have. Did I put that in the packet, Daphne? I think I don't remember if I did.
Yeah, you mentioned it there. Yes.
I mentioned it, but I don't recall if it's in the packet. I'm just scrolling here to see if I can find it.
I didn't see it in the packet. And I guess just to follow up on that is, do you know how that came about, or what input was behind that?
We're not. I spoke with Abby about this today. We're not entirely sure why that specifically was shown that way as parkland. We were going to check our notes, and we haven't done that yet. Well, I shouldn't speak for Abby, but I know that Abby, you were wondering whether that had been done in error. I'll defer to Abby.
I wondered if it had been done during a brief period of time when the developer was discussing the possibility of making this parkland for some needed fields, which I think was determined that it wasn't going to proceed. And this was not included as part of the parkland dedication for the development. So when the project initially came forward for the GIP master development plan approval, this site was not one of the dedicated parkland areas.
Thank you, Abby.
And Mark and Abby, you've come to the conclusion that this use is consistent enough with the comp plan that the comp plan doesn't need amendment?
I'm comfortable with it. Yes, I'm comfortable with it because of the master development plan envisioned this to be institutional, which had an open space component. The comp plan talks about parkland. So the developer has a right to do an institutional use here, civic use, I should say. And churches, which can have cemeteries with them, are civic uses. So I'm comfortable that it's within, I mean, it didn't specifically list cemeteries, and that's why we advised to be cautious. It was safer just to do the GIP amendment, but I think it's reasonably consistent with both the master development plan and the comp plan for this site. I'm comfortable with that.
Okay.
As zoning administrator.
Thank you. I've got a couple of quick questions for Terrence. Terrence, how do you envision the site, the cemetery being operated over time? Are you proposing that this be purchased by a cemetery operator, or will your enterprises be running it?
Yes, Randy, the initial thought here is to that we would get it up and running. The Wisconsin Foundation, which is a foundation I founded a number of years ago, would get it up and running and everything. We don't see turning it over to somebody else at this time. There is a law, state law, that prohibits funeral homes and cemeteries from being in common ownership. So you can't like go to a funeral home and say, hey, would you run this cemetery? That's not allowed under Wisconsin law. But in terms of your question about ongoing, so there's a requirement you set aside, people will pay a fee, right? And that fee, there'll be a set aside of a portion of that fee to put into a trust fund. And that trust fund then would be invested and creates income. And then that income will provide for ongoing maintenance. Although in this case, maintenance will be fairly light. It would be mowing, some of the grass paths, maintaining some of the gravel paths. And a lot of this area will depending on how many trees get planted by people, by families, could end up as forested or wooded area that wouldn't be mowed. But there would be a trust fund set up to maintain the shelter and some of the other light maintenance that's required. And that's kind of why I like the idea of getting rid of the funeral home also, because then it becomes a much lighter maintenance burden. And to be honest with you, some of these, many of the ground, if they choose to put in a little rock or a plaque in the ground, mounted in the ground, the intent, if you look on the Green Burial website, is that eventually those become overgrown with, grass or other, soil, et cetera. And the intent is that this kind of disappears. It becomes a park, it's not visible as a cemetery 100 years from now. And that's the deliberate intent behind this kind of burial area. It's not intended to be maintained forever as a cemetery, as we all kind of traditionally think of it. It's designed to have it kind of disappear. I don't know how to describe that.
One more question while I've got you.
Yeah, sure.
You've proposed a landscape buffer on your west property line. Schematically at this point, I assume that with an SIP, you'd have a full landscaping plan or proposal. Would you be planting any trees or other landscaping on the grounds initially, or are you just waiting for future families to do that?
So there'd be two answers. That the answer is yes. So the buffer, what I would propose, as we've done in the past with some other situations, is we'll come up with Bruce Company come up with a proposed landscaping plan. We'll show that to the adjacent homeowner, right? Get their feedback or input. If they want something different or different kind of trees or something. I think it'd be a mix of some evergreens and some maples or oaks, and then on a berm, probably have a 3-foot berm there, 4-foot berm. in that area and let them kind of give their input and then make changes to that. And then we would put that into our SIP request. So there'd be some initial plantings of trees here, probably up near Onken Road. And then the rest of the cemetery is supposed to be open. We have to do some grading, right? So we'll take some of the dirt that's there and do some leveling out of the site. And then planting of vegetation, of course. But the idea is to let the families plant whatever tree that they choose and whatever plant that they choose. And they would plant that typically, although if they don't want to, we can do it for them. So the answer is yes, we'll do some, but mostly the cemetery, the burial area would be not planted until families were to do that by themselves.
So Terrence, you mentioned the berm. Did you? How far away from that will be from the homes? So you said there will be a 50-foot buffer there. So that will be, could you indicate how far away and how long it might be?
Sure. If you look at our plan there next to the house, the depth of the buffer is 50 feet. And then the length of it is the length of their front yard, home and backyard. And the berm would meander, right? It wouldn't just be straight. You kind of make it curvy, have a up and down a little bit. Very much like the berm we planted between our apartments and Phil Simon's golf villa homes on Callaway Court. Very, very similar to that. Some dense foliage being planted. And we would do that sooner rather than later so that those plants grow up and provide the buffer over a few years. I mean, we planted golf villas back in 2012, 13, 14, and those plants they're pretty sizable today.
Okay.
And I had one other comment, Mayor. Sorry. Gretchen, if you're available to just maybe comment, you looked like you had put in quite a bit of research, and I appreciated your efforts there. And maybe you could just summarize or give the other commission members, including myself primarily, a little bit more background. Thank you.
Well, now the order is, John, would you want the Gretchen to
I
go?
think Gretchen was there first, so.
Okay.
Let her
Gretchen,
respond, Randy.
Gretchen, go ahead, then John, and then Kurt.
Well, I was hoping we could just cross some T's and dot some I's with the Wisconsin legislature before we moved on to the site specifics. And I apologize, I'm new to this. Maybe we don't need to look this far, but when I'm looking at the Wisconsin state law, number 157.065, location and ownership of cemeteries, section 2, A 1 through 3, it looks like there could be some issue with putting a cemetery next to existing dwellings. And I'm actually looking for the city to give us some guidance as to how this law relates to us putting a cemetery in next to existing buildings. Would you like me to read those points out loud?
Mark, did Gretchen get a copy of the attorney discussion on this?
Because no, I did not.
Okay.
Did this already get covered?
Well, I asked about it a couple of weeks ago, and the issue is that only applies to recorded plats. And this Bishop's Bay is not considered a recorded plat.
Okay.
But if I could ask Mark to forward you that email.
What about point 3, within 250 feet of any habitable dwelling, publicly or privately owned?
Got the email pulled up if anybody needs it, between Matt Fleming and myself.
Because 1 and 2 specify plat, but 3 does not.
Okay, so Taylor, you want to answer that, or somebody from the city?
Yeah, no, it's fine. Mark, are you working on it, or do you want me to deal with it?
I'm working on it, but if you have it in front of you, I almost found it, but if you would like to summarize in the meantime, that's fine, Taylor.
Essentially, great question, Gretchen, and again, one that, Kurt brought up as well. But yeah, essentially, this is not a recorded plat. And then if you keep reading in that statute, it says that it's permitted with municipal approval or consent, which is exactly what we're doing here. We're getting the city's consent. So we're not just going ahead and doing a cemetery, but we're going through the proper approval process.
Okay, thank you. That answers my question on that point.
And I have it on the screen for the public's benefit as well. You should see it now.
Another question I had about Wisconsin law was 157.128, which one of our public commenters brought up today. According to the city documents that were posted for the agenda, the acres are 19.57 under consideration. And of course, not all of that would be used as cemetery, and Wisconsin state law requires 20 acres. I'm just curious how we're going to make this work with that law.
Can I speak for the developer?
Yeah, go ahead, Tyler.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, we do own the land around it. So if it's a matter of 19 point fill in the blank versus 20, we can add acres. However, I do believe this is a perfect 20-acre parcel. So again, this is stuff that routine, just for your sake and experience with the Plan Commission, this is something that we would address at the SIP level when we, again, gear up and spend thousands of dollars on our civil engineers to appropriately survey the site, et cetera. At this point, it's a high level site plan that we've put together actually internally to save costs. But yeah, that's something that we can explore and come back to the Plan Commission. So, essentially this will go, if the Plan Commission approves it tonight, we would then go to joint zoning tomorrow night, which is Westport and Middleton's plan departments, and then go to Common Council for vote on the GIP amendment. And then we come back a couple months later with the landscaping plan and the civil plans, how to address stormwater, and all the specifics that would be appropriate to address, to be honest, a majority of the concerns that you and some of the residents have expressed as well.
Thank you. I think that all of the residents who are here for the public comment appreciate having these things explained. So I'm just going to keep asking so that everybody knows the process here.
You have more questions, Gretchen, or you're done?
Well, I think there was some question that the committee wanted me to share information about.
Sure, go ahead.
Sure. So that would relate to information the DNR presented to me today. So
Gretchen, would you like me to share your email on the screen? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Would that be helpful? Would you like that or not? Or,
I mean, if you want to, it's fine.
Yeah, well, since it went out to commission members, I think it's good to disclose that as part of this anyway. So go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off. Sorry.
Sure. I mean, from what I've discovered by calling the county, the city, the DNR, the site has had a long and varied history. And from 1987 to 2013, it was operated as a licensed fill site. And that fill does have non-exempt fill types in it, including contaminated soil and foundry sand. Those things would need to be permitted to have something built over it. In addition to that, the county said that there was significant land movement on at least 2 acres from 2014 to 2017. And then the DNR has another license, 2018, which was closed in 2019, as a water management plan for the fill that's on there now, which apparently is what probably Terrence Paul is saying will be moved and used somewhere else. So although in the past it could have been used as a mine, there's no information on that, and there's no mine reclamation information available anywhere. That's what I was looking for first. So that's not on file anywhere. So this would, as the engineering plan specifies, on page 19, the engineering plan specifies that this falls under the DNR reclamation for a historic fill site. And that permit needs to happen before anything can be built here. And there is a way to redevelop this and even put this through quickly, but that engineering report from 2010 does show greater than upper limit VOCs on the site and the strong smell of petroleum. It also shows perched water tables, and contrary to what T-Wall was able to discover, there are some concerns with groundwater and virus contamination and leachate and things like that from cemeteries. And that is really dependent on the type of soil and fill present, including the pH, the temperature, the granulation, whether the interaction with the watershed. And I think it's a little bit disturbing that we don't have more engineering reports to understand if this is an appropriate use. I think I would like to see that this is an appropriate use already with some additional engineering reports. In 2010, the phase 1 engineering report already says that you need to do compaction to build anything. So you guys already knew that. 2, it says that there should be a soil management plan. And 3, it says that the contamination needs to be remediated. It suggests additional test pits and additional characterization of the VOCs and to greater understand what needs to be done there. So without knowing that information, it's hard to understand how you came up with this as an appropriate use, because what we know according to the DNR statements about landfill reclamation, the concerns listed in their documentation that I looked at today is that when something is continually opened up to the surface, it increases the risk of percolation. Now you're talking about the site on Q that was capped. This will not be capped if it's being continually opened up. So I would like to see more information on the subsoil reports that were requested in 2010.
Do you mind if I jump in on
Yeah, so
to respond to
Gretchen,
your questions?
No, okay, Taylor, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I think I'm going to punt to Tom Culp, who's also on the call, who's our environmental consultant. But my question from a legal standpoint would just be at a higher level, which is this the appropriate venue to discuss these questions? This has never, in my history with Terrence for 9+ years now, ever been a GIP level discussion, nor not to say that this is outside of your purview, but this is more appropriate for the WDNR in our county, which, you know, again, I'd love to sit down and explain this outside of this meeting, but you know, just take through the process. You know, there's various permits that we have to get from the county, from the DNR, from the state, from the city, et cetera, before we continue with this use. At this point, this use is just trying to say, hey, from a plan commission side, you know, from a zoning standpoint, from a use standpoint, do you guys think that this is, does this body think that this is an appropriate and compatible use with what the comprehensive plan is? And not getting into phase 1, phase 2 ESAs and percolation tests and VOCs and, you know, all the various acronyms that Tom can lay into us. I think that's all part of our due diligence for the site and stuff that, you know, as a responsible developer, you know, T-Wall's one of the most awarded developers in the state as far as environmental friendly development practices. So, I mean, this isn't our first rodeo. Again, I've dealt with sites that actually have real contamination, and how to appropriately remediate and repurpose those sites in a way that improves the environment in the surrounding area. So again, I don't think, you know, not to shut this discussion down, but I just think it's a waste of everyone's time at this point, because we're speaking in abstracts. You're speaking of a report in 2010 when the standards and tests change throughout time. So I think, again, this is something that we will continue to work on. We'll continue to work with the DNR and the county through this process.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. So Gretchen, do you have any further questions or you're done? Gretchen?
She's muted.
You're done, or you have more questions?
I do have further questions about different aspects, and I think what they're interested in hearing about is how this relates to the vision of the neighborhood, which is, according to the master plan documentation, what the planning commission should be making a decision on. I'm surprised, though, that additional documentation wasn't provided for us to understand if it is an appropriate use of the land, because this is a significant change in the land use from what it was. And that's just going to be I'm just going to leave the comment there.
Okay, thank you. So, Taylor, do you want Tom to make any comments? Tom Kopp, if there's any quick comment, or otherwise
I
we
think-
move on to.
And not to speak for Tom, I think that's something that we can address outside. Usually we don't go into
Okay.
this level of detail for the plan
Okay.
commission. I'm appreciative of everyone's time and realize that there's other agenda items tonight. So I
Okay.
think that's something we can address once we get further into this. And again, at this point, it's not pulling a permit. It's going for a GIP amendment, which says that we can come back with an SIP approval.
Okay, thank you, John, and then
I
Kurt.
took my hand down because I've heard a lot of stuff and I'd rather hear Kurt's other 9 questions.
So, yeah, okay.
Well, hopefully I can get them down to 4 or 5.
Okay, Kurt, go ahead.
And this has been described as parkland. Just to be clear, this is not going to be dedicated to the city at any time, correct?
I don't think so, but
Terrence, Taylor?
Terrence, you want to speak, Terrence or Taylor?
Yeah, there was no plan to dedicate it to the city. I mean, obviously, if the city wants to consider that, 50 or 100 years from now, that we're fine with that, but I don't see any reason to do that. But
right. So it doesn't count for your parkland dedication requirement.
No, if I could just chime in because I chair parks.
PRFC chair, yes.
Asbestos originally 3-4 years ago, it was that big kind of hilly part in the middle. That was the only part that was mentioned as being donated space, and this never came up as I was aware of it.
Okay, thank you, John.
But it was responding to Terrence's claim that they have a lot of parkland dedication, and just to be clear, this is not that.
Yeah, we're ahead of our parkland dedication.
Right.
Also, I just want to say in terms of the environmental, if there is contamination, which we have to do a lot of testing required under DNR rules, we will address that. We have probably I'm not afraid to say, we probably have the #1 best record and most frequent number of cleanups in this county in terms of cleaning up sites that are contaminated, really contaminated, and then turning them into a positive use. So we have tremendous experience going back 40 years on this issue, and we will follow all the rules with the county, the DNR.
And then a question for our.
May I quickly, Kurt, interject?
Oh, yes.
And say, I'm just pointing out that on the screen, since it's related to the topic you just asked, on the screen here in the upper right, can everyone see the future land use map? You'll see it.
Yeah.
So this shows in the key here, public parks and recreation. This is what I was mentioning earlier, and I just wanted to incorporate it into the record of the meeting. That's what the future land use plan map in the comprehensive plan shows, but that's different from the master development plan, which is the existing zoning regulation for the site.
Yeah.
So
This is John Schaefer. If I could comment too, I think because I had conversations with Kathy Olson about this, I think when the making of this map, it was looking at lands that could potentially be placed into that designation because they had no other designation at the time. So this was a speculative map and not a document, just simply pointing out, here's some land that could be if in the future we chose to do that.
that's helpful, John. Thank you.
And that
Thank you,
relates to
John.
my question, Mark, kind of a zoning and planning interpretation. A cemetery is kind of a hybrid between parks and open space and a kind of institutional style use, right? Or because it's more like a institutional use, like a school or a church, than it is a commercial use, like a business. And so I guess the question I have is, how do you interpret what the use plan for this site is? Because I see 2 principal uses on the plan. One is, which is the cemetery. I think we understand that. The other is, if you can pull the site plan back up.
Okay, go ahead, Dave.
The parking area and the open air shelter. What is that use? Because a normal funeral home would be more appropriate to like our B3 district, a business, a highway commercial sort of district, right? Because it has a traffic pattern and land use impact that is more commercial, right? This is obviously not going to be always having traffic. and large gatherings for funerals, obviously. But at some point in time, I guess at frequent times during the year, the parking lot will be filled for a funeral or memorial service. People will gather, they'll do their thing, and then they'll leave. So that, even though it's not four walls, that looks like a funeral home from a land use perspective. So my question is, what do you interpret that land use as?
Yeah.
We have, I think he's asking me, right?
Yeah.
Yep. That's
So
Mark.
our hearing notice that I wrote said to allow a cemetery and funeral home on this parcel, while the regulating plan identified this as a neighborhood civic lot type. The GIP does not list either cemetery or funeral home as either permitted or conditional use of property. So I would have to go to the master development plan and see what else was listed under neighborhood civic, and I'm doing that now.
Right, so a cemetery is like a park and recreation in its impact and performance relative to planning criteria. But a large parking lot where people gather, see, if this were a church, you understand you get a lot of traffic on Sundays and Wednesday nights, but it's what people expect. Or if it's a school, you get traffic in the morning and the afternoon drop off. But this would be more like a lot of weekend traffic, I'm sure, for like funerals, right? Or evening traffic?
Well, so would a school. A school would have a parking lot with that type of traffic as well. So I would say that that's permitted use currently.
So you're interpreting this as ancillary to the park-like function?
Yes.
We certainly have parks in the city that have parking lots.
Right.
Parking lots and shelters.
Like tenants and use the splash pad and something.
But when they have large gatherings all at once, it looks more like a commercial facility than a park, right? I'm just asking Mark for the interpretation.
My interpretation is that the parking lot would currently be a permitted use ancillary to the principal use, the principal use, which would be their neighborhood civic under the current, and in this case, the park, because we do have parking lots, as Commissioner Schaefer has noted. I think it's a good question, and I appreciate the question, Kurt.
Well, the reason I ask is, I think if it were actually a funeral home, that looks to me like a commercial use. But an open park shelter kind of has a different vibe, I guess. So.
Well, don't you think people have to come, they have to park? I mean, you know, we don't really ride bikes, so maybe
a lot of cemeteries don't have big parking lots because you don't get everybody all at once. You get a few families at any time. Right. You don't have large funerals at the cemetery.
I guess to answer your question in a more specific way, Commissioner Paulson, I would say that the conversion from a funeral home to an open shelter with parking is less of a change from the original GIP than what the request was in the.
Thank you.
So, Kurt, you're done?
Those are all my questions now.
Okay, thank you. So,
you know, the question could be asked at further down the line if the parking lot, to your point, Kurt, if that's more parking lot than they need.
Yeah, that will come at SIP level. So yeah, that's a great point, Elder Renzi. So John, you have any other question?
Well, I just had a comment only that, you know, we're talking a lot about restrictions next to existing buildings, and a number of the people writing letters were talking about property values going down and, you know, moving it into a neighborhood. But as I see the land, there's nothing built around here at the moment. And so in a sense, every single home that would go up next to this cemetery would be built by somebody who knows the cemetery is there. So I don't really see that as a strong reflection. In fact, if there's any risk, it's Terrence's risk, because if that's true, he's not going to be able to sell property next to it. So that's so I don't see that as a big issue here. And I think, you know, it's really the one house that's the concern, but the rest of you know, the issues that Gretchen brought up, I think are important issues, and will come back to us. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Gretchen?
Hi, I had some specific questions about the site before we talk about how it fits with the vision of the neighborhood more specifically. I was wondering if the developer could speak to the size of the plots that will be used and the overall density. I saw in one document earlier that they were listing 500 bodies per acre. Is that still the case, or have they reduced it?
This is the
Okay.
developer.
Go ahead, Terrence.
The 500 sites per acre is the maximum allowed under the green burial rules. So we're following that. Again, that would be under that number. I don't know, but a typical burial site is about 6 feet long and about 3 feet wide. You know, that's your standard, so to speak. But we have to stay within the limits of the Green Burial Council, whatever regulations, I guess you call it.
Thank you, Terrence. Gretchen, you have any further questions?
Yeah, I have a comment on that. So according to their website, that is the maximum, but they also say that that is not normal and that it's considerably less usually, and that the sites are usually 10 by 10, 10 by 15. I think that's one of the concerns that the community has. And I wonder if the developer would be amenable to changing the plan to have less density and perhaps make it into a conservation burial ground, which might fit the tone of the neighborhood much better.
Well, I do want to speak up to that. It is very, very important that spouses be allowed to be buried next to each other. That is absolutely critical, and not spread apart. That is, we interview people and have talked to people about this, their feedback. That is a critically important thing. I think we stand by the Green Burial Council rules, that we don't try to invent different rules here. There's already been established rules by the Green Burial Council. Let's go with that.
I did get that right off their website in their facts.
And can I also point out too, 500 per acre is 87 square feet per body. So I mean, we're not talking about sardines here, for perspective.
Okay, thank you, Taylor. So
I have a question on what will be used to cover the sites. This, again, is not a conservation burial that you propose. It looks like it's going to be covered with turf grass and then mown. Is that the case? And will you be using chemicals, pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers? And will it be irrigated?
Yeah, to respond, that's a good question. Will depend on each family. So when they have a site, they could say, well, we want to have a tree here or multiple trees or bushes. Other families might want to have mowed grass. We don't use chemicals. In fact, by coincidence, I just told Bruce Company again this week, you know, just a reminder, don't use Roundup. You know, we always require our landscapers to use dog and pet friendly, you know, chemicals. I had to use the word chemicals in our lease agreements with our farmer. Taylor, correct me, but we prohibit nitrates and phosphates and things like that because we don't want those contaminating the groundwater. So we are very, you know, concerned about the environment here in terms of the, you know, we did, you know, I'm the only developer to win the Governor Doyle's award for, you know, energy sustainability. And I've worked with the the Clean Lakes Alliance, where we built a detention pond, a very large detention pond here in a partnership with Clean Lakes and the county to help the county in terms of their effort cleaning up the phosphates in Dorn Creek, which is down, you know, across the road quite some distance. But so we've done tremendous things that are green and sustainable. We'll continue to do that here, as we've always done with all of our developments. So yeah, we're very, very careful about making sure they don't use harmful chemicals and such. And that would defeat the whole purpose of this green burial site if we didn't follow that, right?
Yes, indeed.
And to that end too, I mean, I've done the farm leases with our farmers, and I think this will be a lot better for the environment than the current farming uses.
Oh, great. Do you plan to dig and fill these sites by hand or with machinery?
Well, those are really for the details. I think we are really looking at the the planning level here. So unless, if you
Well,
want to answer. that,
Mayor,
please
if I
go
may,
ahead.
they're important to how they relate to the question of vision coming up later.
Yeah, go ahead, answer, Terrence or Taylor. If you want to.
Oh, yeah, again, we haven't made that determination. We're not at that stage. I gotta be, I want to be respectful, but I also want you to respect our rights in this hearing, and that, a reminder that this is the big picture, the GIP level, the MDP level. We'll be coming back at the SIP level with all the details. Let's stick at the level that's, under the legal purview at the current time. We'll get into more details later, but I don't think, how a burial site is dug is pertinent to a land use decision by, Plan Commission. And I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I also want us to be respected as well on this issue. And, again,
You don't have a comment,
look,
you can just say no
I've-
comments and move
well,
on.
I've been around for, doing development for 40 years. I'm the #1 green sustainable developer in Dane County. I created the first
You're not
sustainable
answering the
development
question. Let's move on.
course at the University of Wisconsin in the world.
Terrence Wall, it's my turn to speak.
I'm just saying. I'm
How
answering your
often do you plan to bury?
Gretchen,
I will
think,
speak up and I will say that I really appreciate your level of detail, Gretchen, but I would really appreciate if you were to put these type of specific, highly detailed and not GIP amendment level type questions in writing and propose them to the developer. That's routinely how, or if you send it to Mark can send it to us and we can get you an answer. Again, I'm respectful of the fact that it is now 8:30. It's an hour and a half into your meeting and you still have, Mark,
Yes,
5 other
wasting
things
a
on
lot
the
of
agenda. So
time.
I don't think this is appropriate, Gretchen. So I just want to
Will there
stop
be
you and
gun
say, if
salute
you have
in the
other
Veterans
questions.
Cemetery?
Okay, so Gretchen, you have any other quick question now?
Well, the
I'm very
questions Gretchen is
frustrated
asking
that these
are related to
questions
the land use. If there's trucks
yes.
all the time, that's a land use issue.
Yes, and we need to make a decision according to their master plan, chapter 7, on the vision of the neighborhood. And without them answering the questions about the use of the site, I don't know how I can make that decision appropriately.
Okay, go ahead. You have another
Yeah,
question?
having a gun salute is quite a different situation than having a school.
Okay.
Having
Yep.
continual digging with machinery for all of the properties surrounding it will be very different than having graves dug by hand. And I think these questions matter to the public that live in the area. I don't live in the area. I'm not asking for me.
Yeah, thank you. You have another question?
May I make a procedural suggestion?
Yeah, go ahead.
And Gretchen had talked to me about this yesterday, and so I wanted to give the same information, what I said to her, to everybody. So I see 3 ways that you could proceed tonight. One is, obviously, you could decide that you have enough information and you're ready to make a recommendation on the GIP amendment, and I don't know that you're there. Second is you could say we need more information, and I think that's what Gretchen is doing, is she's saying these are questions she has, and so maybe it would be helpful along that line for her to just list the questions she has, and maybe there isn't a give and take on it right now, but that way commission members know what the questions are. And then your third option is obviously, if you make a motion tonight, you can move to deny and not recommend a change to the GIP. So those are your 3 options. But the middle one is we need more information based on questions that are being raised. So maybe it would be helpful for any commission member with questions just to list the questions they have, and you can determine whether you have enough information to make a motion later.
Okay, thank you, Mark.
Yeah.
Okay, so Gretchen, you have more questions? Otherwise, the next one is Randy, Bruce, and then Kurt Paulson.
Go ahead.
Gretchen, you have more questions, or do you want to make a list and send it to Mark for answers?
Whatever works.
Well, I didn't mean to cut Gretchen off. I simply was trying to recognize that there was some conflict in the room, and to try and offer a framework for going through this expeditiously, recognizing that there's questions being asked regarding the land use. So I thought it would be helpful to provide some framework.
Sure, thank you.
So maybe
Randy,
Gretchen has a chance to
Kurt
finish.
Paulson, and then Gretchen, if you had more questions. So Randy, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to comment that maybe I feel the same way as Kurt. Some of Gretchen's questions do pertain to the use, and once we give the GIP approval, the use is pretty well approved.
Okay.
And at that point, then we're going to be really just discussing details. I would say that Mark made a good suggestion. Maybe we present the developer with questions relative to the development and the proposed use that maybe helps clarify our thoughts about it, so that we could take them up at the next plan commission or the next available plan commission. I want to hear from other commissioners of what they thought about that.
So are you making that motion, or should I ask Kurt to? Kurt, you have raised your hand.
Yeah, I was going to follow Randy and Gretchen's point, which is obviously the groundwater issues, the permit, that's at the DNR stage. But whenever we consider a land use or a zoning question from the planning perspective, we not only think about the use relative to its surrounding uses, but we think about the kind of performance or impact elements. You don't put a fast food restaurant in a residential area because of the lights and the traffic, but it might be appropriate in a commercial area. So particularly her questions about if there's going to be constant digging, then it feels more like a construction site. And if there's going to be gun salutes, that feels impactful. So that these are kind of performative criteria on the land use, which I think we do have to deal with at the GIP stage, which is why, one other alternative, Mark, is to make a cemetery or a funeral home a conditional use on this parcel that would then allow us through the conditional use process to put some of those additional performance criteria. Because once we approve the rezoning, the use is kind of set.
So are you ready to make a motion to that we request for additional information? Is that what you're going to, you or Randy?
Well, so
before we go there, guys, can I just ask though, when you're talking about the gunfire, I mean, there's hunting across the street at the county park right there. And then when you talk about construction and trucks, we're talking about a 2 foot by 6 foot hole when you've got 1,300 homes in this development, of which less than 300 of which have been developed. So I just ask you to put it into the context of the surrounding development, which is this is not a developed community, and this is in a location where there's going to be tremendous significant construction for the next 40 years with houses going in, of which I'm sure you've all seen house construction. It is very disruptive, and that's not what we're proposing here. So whether it's shoveled by hand or by truck, I don't know if it matters absent an ordinance that were to require trucks not to dig. But then how are you ever as a city going to continue to develop? I mean, again, as Terrence always points out, this is 100% of the tax growth for the city of Middleton right here. And if we don't start to allow some development activity in the community of Bishop's Bay, this will never start up again. And we'll just walk away. And I hate that every time I'm brought to these meetings, it comes to this, but this is where we're at. I've seen the financials. We've got to start developing, because if we sit on this, we can't survive. And so I don't like to put it in those terms, but I just want to make sure that we're, I know the Plan Commission is always talking about context of the development. And that's what I'm asking you to do, is look at the context. I wish we'd have brought pictures of this. I was in these fields this morning with my car or with my truck. I mean, these are empty fields, guys. So I just would like to interject that.
Okay, thank you, Taylor.
And it would be backhoes, not trucks. Just
okay. So is there anybody ready to make a motion? Or one form or the other?
I would just note that the Middleton Westport Joint Zoning Committee is going to take this up tomorrow, but a referral or postponing action until they act, I think would be appropriate as well. So that would be a updated staff recommendation.
I
Okay.
would like to just reply to the lawyer that it's not normal to have holes continually dug in what's considered a park or open space. So if it's being presented as a park or open space that will have continually digging machinery in it, that doesn't feel consistent.
This
The
was
other
never
thing
a
is
park
that
or
this-
open space.
Excuse me.
This is supposed to be a school.
You made 2 points
This
and
is
I would
supposed to
like
be
to
two
rebut 2
schools.
points.
Taylor, please let her finish. Thank you. Go ahead, Gretchen.
The other thing is that this development is on the far periphery and it doesn't appear to be impeding the rest of the development.
Okay.
So
Are
yeah,
you
to
done, Gretchen?
talk about this is, we
Just-
never
just a-
consented to
Taylor,
this site.
Just a
Okay.
minute, please. So Gretchen, you are
Yep.
done? Okay, go ahead, Taylor.
Yeah, to the point that this was open space and park. I have yet to see an offer from the city to buy this as a park. We are not, as a developer, proposing to add more parkland because for the MDP, if you'll review the MDP, like I think Gretchen has, I do believe that you've reviewed our MDP in detail. You'll see that we are far in excess of the required parkland dedication for any development of this size. So therefore, an offer to buy a private piece of land from the city, this will be developed. So it's a matter of what this will be developed into. And so what we're looking at is a civic use. So this is supposed to be 2 schools with a lot of asphalt, a lot of lights, a lot of noise, a lot of traffic. We're talking about dramatically reducing that. You know, as far as the gun salutes, we're talking about maybe less than 100 plots for veterans here. I mean, I think we're getting so lost down the road as far as the context of the greater scheme of this master development.
No,
Yeah. Thank you, Taylor. John, please go ahead.
Yeah, I 2 things. One is it's not helpful when you sort of hold us hostage over your need to make the money. Please, I would prefer you don't speak like that. I know you're upset and angry, but you know, our job is to protect the city, not necessarily to make you guys get money and take care of your property. You have to do what the city wants as well. End of that. Second of all, you've been putting a lot of energy, you and Terrence, into telling us how this is going to be so beautiful and so quiet and grow up as a forest, and it's going to function. And by the time it gets mature, we're going to think of this as not just a park, but a forest where people can go and be quiet and all these things. So when you come back with the school, I find that very disingenuous. Okay, this is not a factory. You're the ones telling us that this is going to be a beautiful, peaceful, quiet place where people in the community can roam around and treat it like a park. Okay, enough said.
Okay, thank you, John. Randy?
Yes, I guess I'm going to make a motion.
Okay, go ahead.
I'd like to refer this to the next Plan Commission meeting with the understanding that the commission kind of boil down whatever comments they have so that the developer can answer them at the next meeting. And to the best that we can. I guess we could send emails into Mark with whatever questions. And I'd also like Mark to give us an opinion as to whether we could at the next meeting use the conditional use process within the plan development, if that's possible, because that would solve a lot of our problems right now and would allow Terrence the ability to move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Do I have a
Slavish will second that.
Okay, any further question or comments?
Can I make a substitute motion?
Okay.
I mean, I think we've heard a lot of information and I'm not sure what else we would get. So just to move it along, I would make a motion that we forward it to City Council without a negative or positive recommendation, but for their consideration as a GIP amendment.
I just need to say that we're supposed to be making a decision according to their master development plan on the vision, and we haven't even talked about how it relates to the vision of their neighborhood. So we haven't discussed what we need to yet. So I would, go for the first motion.
Okay, so is there any?
Procedurally,
Can I
Okay,
ask
is there
that
any?
this continued
Wait.
to go on to?
Taylor,
Wait, I made a
Taylor.
motion. It needs a second.
Taylor.
or it
Mayor,
dies.
yes,
Taylor.
exactly.
Taylor, please, is there any second to?
Ramsey will second Polson's motion.
Okay,
Okay, now we can discuss my motion.
Thank you.
okay, further questions or comments? Now it will be the alternate motion, so.
Just so that everyone understands, so when the substitute motion is made, that takes precedence over the main motion. And so the
Yep.
discussion now is on the substitute motion.
Yeah,
And it's
Sorry.
to send it to council without a negative or positive recommendation, but that they can hear what we've heard, and ultimately they have to make the choice anyway. It's a rezoning.
any questions or comments on alternate motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a comment.
Okay, go ahead.
Kurt, since you brought up the question about a conditional use, would you accept a friendly amendment that would attach that standard to it?
If I may, it is already conditional use.
No,
cemetery.
excuse me, Gretchen, he's
Uh,
asking
I
that.
was just trying to fill in the information.
No,
the
he's
city
asking,
ordinance.
he's asking Kurt right now. Please let them finish first.
Gretchen,
Okay,
it's a
so-
conditional use in which of our zoning districts?
In the city ordinances. Chapter 10.115, conditional use, and cemetery is listed. And all the previous uses were also listed, landfill, mining, and school. So I think it's always going to be a conditional use site if we're considering these things.
None of it's PDD.
Art?
Not if it's a PD.
Yeah.
No, not if it's PDD.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what Commissioner Erdman, I'm sorry, I don't remember. What Gretchen is referring to is a provision in our ordinance that's just generic regarding all conditional uses and what the procedures are for reviewing conditional uses. I think, Gretchen, is that what you're referring to?
Might be
Yeah.
a different point in there, but in chapter 10, it does discuss conditional uses, and cemeteries is one of them. So it would be very appropriate to put it forward as a conditional use.
But under the section that you cited, I don't believe the word cemetery exists. That's just the general, that's how we handle conditional
Okay,
uses
maybe
in
it's
general.
around page 50. I can find the page if you want, but it's
No,
in chapter 10.
Yeah, I think what you're referring to is if it's on page 50 under PDDs.
It's just the process for conditional uses. It's page 100 on the ordinance.
It's possible, right? You may have, Gretchen, what you may have seen was somewhere in our ordinance, one of the zoning districts. Yeah, for example.
Agriculture.
I just was going to say the same thing, Abby. I was just about to say.
So Abby, go ahead. Abby, so what did you find, Abby?
No, it's found under agriculture as a conditional use in an agricultural district, but that's just for that district only.
Well, to Randy's question, making this a conditional use in the PUD, we'd have to give some guidance to council as to what standards to enumerate in the ordinance, because conditional uses require enumeration of standards in the ordinance. Although performance standards such as noise and light are generally available to us on any conditional use.
And I guess my thought would be we could just reference the city's typical conditional use standards, I guess, if that's possible.
So Randy, do you feel that we are not really ready for it? So we need to sort those things out? Is that what you think?
Again, I'm just I'm a bit sensitive to Gretchen's comments relative to just making sure that we've thought through the issues. I personally agree that this use will be relatively well accepted once it's all in, but we don't have a lot of maybe a lot of information at this point. And the problem with a PD zoning is that once we get the GIP in place, we really don't have anything else that we're going to be able to do relative to that use. And so I thought Kurt's suggestion of using conditional use standards was a way for us just to have a bit more leverage, perhaps, in terms of working with the developer and finalizing, the details.
Okay, Abby?
Sorry, I was just gonna say that, just thinking about the idea to add this as a conditional use within the PDD. I'm not sure how our city attorney would interpret this, but I'm concerned that it may require another public hearing to amend the GIP to add this listed as a conditional use, and then a second hearing
For the
on the
conditional use.
conditional use itself. So I think it would add substantial time.
Yeah, that's why I was concerned, is we did not notice this as a GIP amendment for a conditional use.
Okay. And Taylor, I think.
I will not
So-
accept Randy's friendly amendment for
Okay,
that reason.
fine.
Sorry.
Thank you. So Taylor, if you have any really quick comment, I have given you
I do.
enough time to
Quick.
speak, so.
Could
Okay.
you guys also add in that it could go to joint zoning tomorrow night with Westport Middleton joint zoning is scheduled. I just want to make sure that we get their feedback tomorrow too.
It's already on our agenda for tomorrow.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure that that's not going to get moved based on the actions. Okay.
Okay, maybe this may be, okay, we are voting on the alternate motion, which is to send it to the city council, and going to the Westport zoning commission is going to happen. So all those in favor of that motion say
Mayor,
aye.
Mayor, I'm sorry, just to clarify for record keeping, the motion was to forward a motion with no positive or negative recommendation to the council.
Mhm.
And
That's all
would
the
you
motion.
like a roll call vote for this one?
Yeah, let's go with roll call.
Do all the commissioners understand the motion? Any questions? Okay. Bruce,
Approve, yes.
Erdman Hermans,
Oppose.
Paulson,
Yes.
Ramsey,
Yes.
Schaefer,
Yes.
Slavish.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Brian Brar
Oh,
and Brar.
Brar, sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm opposed. I thought it should go to we need the information, so then we can decide, so. But it passes 5-2, right?
5-2, yes, and
Okay.
I apologize. I'm not used to calling a roll
No,
call.
That's okay. Okay, we move on to the next item.
And Mayor, may I suggest, just to, in the interest of tidying this up, this discussion, I like the idea of providing the questions that people have, any commission member, and sending them in a form. If you'd like me to send them to me by tomorrow morning, I can forward them include them with our packet to the council, as well as provide them to the Middleton Westport Joint Zoning Committee if you so wish.
Okay.
But do that individually, don't copy everybody, just send them to me.
Yes, please,
So-
it's for all the commissioners, send all your questions or comments to Mark individually rather than copying all. And Mark, once you have them, if you could share them with me, that would be great. And by the end of the day tomorrow?
Let's say by, well, I prefer by noon so I can get them to the Middleton Westport Joint Zoning Committee members. That would be ideal if you could get them to me after the meeting or first thing in the morning. But
Tomorrow
by
by noon.
1 o'clock.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, we are on to, thank you, everyone. And we are on to item number 2. Set a public hearing rezoning from planned development district to a different PDD, general implementation plan, multi-family development on a vacant Captainville site, T5 Real Estate Solutions, 6100 Lake Street. Abby?
I move to set a public hearing for Tuesday, October 26th at 7 p.m.
Schaefer seconds.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion to set a public hearing on Tuesday, October 26, 2021 at 7 p.m. say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Item number 3, to set a public hearing for amendment to general implementation plan for Airport Road Business Park pertaining to a lot at 3158 Deming Way.
Ramsey moves to set public hearing October 26th at 7 p.m.
Okay, need a second?
I'll second,
Okay.
Paulson.
Okay, and any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to set a public hearing for amendment to general implementation plan for Airport Road Business Park pertaining to lot at 3158 Deming Way say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passed unanimously. Item number 4, set a public hearing application for conditional use permit, Bill's Towing 3158 Deming Way. This is what we just said in number 3 here. So,
Mayor, I just wanted to point out that this is the procedure that Abby was mentioning just a short while ago, when you have a 2-step procedure for doing a GIP amendment and then a conditional use. This is a perfect example of one of them.
Yep. Okay, need a motion to set a public
Move to
hearing.
set the hearing for a conditional use permit for October 26th at 7 p.m.
Okay, need a second?
Schaefer seconds.
Okay, all those, any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion to set a public hearing for the application for conditional use permit for the Bill's Towing 3158 Deming Way on October 26th at 7 p.m. say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We are on to item number 5. SIP modification for sign design review at Unity Point Health Meritor 2237 Deming Way. So who's going to, Daphne?
Yeah, I can take it, Mayor. So this is for the Unity Point Health Meritor that moved into the old PF Chang's building. They're proposing a monument sign at the driveway, and then with the possibility of adding, 3 more tenant signs for the other parcels that are there. There's no, proposals for those other parcels yet, but in the future, if that is developed, these signs, these tenant signs can be added.
Okay, and looks good to me. So need a motion to approve?
Ramsey will
Okay.
move to approve.
Okay, I second it. Any questions or comments?
And just to make
With
clear
the
that the
referral to
motion
Public Works.
is, referral to Public Works.
Yep.
Yep, that's included, refer to Public Works Committee because of the approval of the encroachment agreement. Any
Mayor,
further questions or comments?
Mayor,
Any
I just
questions?
wanted to,
Go ahead, Mark.
Mayor, I just wanted to say that I really appreciate, and I'm sure Daphne does too, the sign company's willingness to work with us on consolidating signage for these parcels, because there's a lot of driveways that serve multiple tenants. And so this is something that we advise the applicant to develop this sign program like this. And I appreciate their working with us on it. I don't know if they're on the call, but I just wanted to point out that we had a willing property owner, I mean, a representative of the business to enlarge their scope to have a comprehensive sign package for the area.
I think sounds like a good plan.
Yeah.
All those, any questions or comments? All those in favor of the motion for the SIP modification for sign design review for Unity Point Health Meritor 2237 Deming Way, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes. We are on to item number 6. Specific implementation plan. Is it still there or withdrawn?
Mayor, I would move to defer based on the request of the applicant. Defer to the next meeting.
Okay, so I will read it in any case. specific implementation plan for 3810, which is at 3815 Tribeca Drive. So, okay, so Kurt, you made a motion to defer to the next meeting, need a second.
Slavish will second.
Could it be to defer to a future meeting? So we
To a
don't,
future meeting,
Okay.
yes.
thank you.
Okay, to a future meeting. We got a really big issues here, so. And any questions or comments, or does Mark, you want to say anything?
No, I'm glad the motion says a future, so we're not locked in. Sure.
Yeah, you want to give a reason because of
I'm sorry. Yeah, that we received correspondence today. Actually, Abby received it, but the applicant wanted a requested deferral, and since it was already on the agenda, this was really the only way to dispense with it was to make a motion to defer. Abby, if you have any reasons you want to.
Yeah, I believe that the applicant's planning to resubmit a new SIP that would go back to the 2 building proposal that was included in the original GIP, and it has to do with some of the different financing sources that they're using. We did receive some news this morning from the DOA that they are going to be rescinding the grant application that the city prepared for $3 million in disaster recovery funding. And the reason for that is that they noted that there had been too many changes from what the original proposal was from the developer. And so we're going to be bringing forward something to the city council to consider applying in the second round of funding. And that is enabling JT Klein and Lutheran Social Services some time to rethink the SIP. So they are planning to submit a new request for an SIP, and they would like for that to be done 3 weeks in advance of the October 26th meeting. So that's when I would anticipate that this item would be on the agenda again.
So the CDP, that grant, if they were to change that now, there's no way to rescinding the rescinded offer, then that's too late, right?
Unfortunately, no. We have been through numerous meetings with the DOA staff, and it's not a possibility.
Okay, all right. So the motion is to defer to a future meeting. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? So the motion passes. We are on to item number 7. This is a revised concept review of Bell Farms, 44-acre, 4 parcels east of 4887 Parmenter Street. So who's going to take it? This is, there's a lot here. So
I can just give an overview and then I'll pass it over to the developer. This is a new concept from what was previously proposed and approved by the Plan Commission in June. And at that June meeting date, the Plan Commission referred this item out to a few other committees. And the changes that are being proposed by the developer are largely based on the feedback from the committee referrals that were made at that initial concept review meeting. I do want to just give kudos to Kathleen Slattery-Moshkow and her team that she has assembled to work on this development for taking the input that they're getting from the committees and incorporating that into the new concept. The biggest change is that they're removing the urban park that was initially shown to encompassed by Bellefontaine eastbound and westbound. The 2 lanes of traffic were separated with the urban park in the middle. And there were concerns with Public Works Committee about safety. And I know that there were also some concerns that were raised at least by our parks staff. I don't know if there were concerns expressed during the Parks Commission meeting. But the new proposal is for a public park that would be located on the north end of the development. And the developer is proposing 3.25 acres of parkland dedication. The Parks Board is supportive of the concept. Some of the big outstanding issues that I hope the commission would focus on and that still need to be hashed out through the process are the future cross section of Bellefontaine Boulevard, as well as the alignment. We are waiting on additional information from the MPO. They are updating their traffic demand model And that will help to inform how this road will function in the future. I know that the developer and probably many of the plan commissioners do not want a 4-lane traffic that is dividing this 4-lane road that would be dividing the neighborhood. I heard the developers' representatives expressing concerns about that at the Public Works Committee last night. There is still a CUSA amendment that would be required for this project, and the developer and her team are working on preparing that right now. There is also a rezoning that would be required, and there would be a traffic impact analysis that would need to be completed as part of the rezoning. And there are still issues related to stormwater management that will need to be handled with the rezoning application. This has already been to the Water Resources Management Commission for the concept, which is pretty early in the process. And there were a couple of paragraphs in the concept submittal pertaining to how the developer plans to meet the highest standards for stormwater management, including regional facilities, as well as on a building by building basis. I also wanted to note that the developer held a neighborhood meeting on 9/8, and there were about 30 people in attendance, including Mark and Daphne, who took some really good notes that we can send along to the Plan Commission or include when this item comes before you for a rezoning. And then the Public Works Committee met again to discuss this concept last night, and Mark Opitz forwarded the minutes from that meeting to you all earlier. And unless you clicked on the agenda and the attachments, some of the items that were raised by Public Works Committee might not have made a whole lot of sense, because their commission agenda included an additional document that was the concept road network document, which wasn't included in the PC agenda. So apologies for that. We can go through some of the points that were raised at Public Works Committee if you wish, after the developer has an opportunity to make her presentation.
Okay, great job, Kathleen. Would you like to make a presentation, or any from your group?
Yeah, that would be great. Can I share my screen?
Absolutely. Abby will make that happen.
Okay.
Abby,
Well, and I just wanted to add on to what Abby said. Last night we held a second neighborhood meeting, which was also well attended, and it seems like there's a lot of excitement for the project. And so I did want to let you know we reconnected with neighbors again last night. So as Abby mentioned, I know this has been a long meeting so far, so I will try to keep it short and sweet here, even throughout the changes. So when we met with Parks and Water Resource Management and Public Works, even throughout the changes in this process, we tried to keep coming back to our guiding principles, so that even as we were changing, we were still holding true to what we wanted to do here. And of course, that's that focus on wellness and thriving and sustainability, opportunities to commune with nature and be outside, community presence, a chance to be peaceful. And so we just kept looking back at that, even as we had to keep carving, changing things, I'll put it that way. So here's that original concept plan. And remember, there was that urban park with the road circling it. When Public Works was concerned about the safety of people crossing the road to get into the park, we reconfigured the road, but also in response to our meeting with Water Resource Management. When we came before the Plan Commission in June, we were very early in the process and we had just started working on our stormwater management plan. And then we attended the Water Resource Committee meeting, and that was fantastic because they gave a lot of good direction that allowed us to just get down to work. And that included, obviously we had our wetland delineation, then we took another 100 feet beyond that for a Graber Pond buffer. And that meant that we ended up pulling all that land up away from the pond, and it kind of flipped, right? So then the urban park that was there then went south of the property and created more green space around the pond. That left us with a little bit of a conundrum about parks, because some of the original plan was to dedicate some of the urban park and some of the other areas to parkland. But the more we were diving into stormwater management, we knew we wanted to do many, many layers of best practices, and that would necessitate us using our green space as stormwater management in multiple ways. So to make it, and we knew that that meant that it couldn't become dedicated parkland if we were using it as stormwater management. So then we came up with the idea to take what was one of our multifamily buildings in the upper left corner of the site, our soccer fields, our basketball courts, our pickleball courts, and our farm. We gave away the farm and made that all dedicated parkland. That made it really clean and easy for the parks. This was going to be used in a park-like way prior to that anyway, and allows us to really do all the things we want to do in terms of stormwater management. So again, oops, I'm just gonna, cursor got away from me. So again, the area that becomes dedicated parkland is in the upper left. The area that was revised is all in the yellow. Really, for the most part, there weren't many changes along Parmenter in terms of the multifamily. So that left us here, and I apologize. I know we never want to surprise anyone, which is actually why we came back tonight. We want to do a second concept review since the plan had changed so much, and we wanted to get this before you, before we submitted our application, so that there were no surprises. But even since we submitted our packet for this meeting 3 weeks ago, things have been evolving by the hour as we're working on the bike path and all the different elements. So again, this is the more refined drawing of kind of the coloring book drawing that Abby had shown before that we had submitted with the packet. But you can get a little bit of a better sense of things in terms of, again, the Bellefontaine went from being that circular one-way to a two-way. We still respected the transect in terms of low to high density. That is very important to me in terms of creating a development that felt really good and that makes sense and that just seems awesome from a land use perspective. So when you come in from Misty Valley, again, it's lower density, there's more breathing space. And as you make your way down Bellefontaine, the heat starts to build as we get to higher density and a little more thriving area with more of our commercial aspects and that sort of thing. Another thing, which I'll get to a little bit, there is now a dedicated 10-foot off-road, so away from traffic, bike path that'll take you all the way from Misty Valley all the way to Parmenter. And then you'll also be able to, and you'll see this in a second, pull in from the southerly bike path coming in from Misty Valley, and that will be an off-road way to hook up to the main path. So we're excited about the connectivity that this creates in terms of the bike area. We still have, we're very pedestrian oriented. We have lots of footpaths all throughout the development, lots and lots of housing types. So as you come into the development, we obviously still have some estate homes up here, townhomes. There's a space between the townhomes and the back. You can probably see that the back, so with the garages on the townhomes have ADUs over them. So we were looking to very intentionally create opportunities for ADUs for a few different reasons. Not only, obviously ADUs can be helpful in terms of helping solve the housing issues that we have, but also in the world of the pandemic to maybe have a lot of people are working from home and need maybe a separate space to work. So it kind of can solve that problem. It can help solve a problem if you have a relative, an elderly relative, or even a younger relative who might need a place to stay. So we wanted to build that right into the equation. So the orange townhomes have garages that have ADUs over them that can be flex with the world as it is right now and continues to change. So those are the townhomes. Up above here, these are carriage homes up here along this area. This is Serenby Street. So this is our neighborhood, quiet neighborhood, awesome street with front porches and everybody having lots of ample opportunity to meet your neighbors. You go for walks and stop and talk. And I know Middleton's familiar with this because you have some wonderful neighborhoods that do this already. But along here are the cottage homes. And then along here are the shotgun homes. Back along this fan area are nest cottages. So they're on the smaller side. I think that covers things in terms of housing. And then we get to the multifamily. And again, the multifamily is comprised of a variety of sizes of not only apartment units, but condos as well. And so there will be that mix of ownership and rental as it relates to multifamily. And the point was to create a lot of different types of housing and sizes of housing to provide ample opportunity for people to step into living here. And so whether that's down to micro units on the, some micro units available within the multifamily, I mean, all the way up through estate houses. And when we say estate houses, it's nothing like what you think of in terms of McMansions. We're talking about 3,000 square feet, and there will be, a little bit more owner control over those aspects. But again, we tried to create all this opportunity to connect on foot and on bike, and to create the commercial that is here is very curated, not building a ton of commercial that just ends up empty or being rented out to something we don't want it to be. It's to serve the community. So I know you guys know this, but that small or coffee shop and grocer, a new addition, and there's we're hoping to have like an independent pharmacy, tapas bar down here in the studio area, again, that farm to table restaurant and inn. So one of the things we're most excited with the changes, because there was a gem that, some gems that came out of having to change it so much. And one is the addition of the boardwalk. So the boardwalk will extend all the way from the multifamily all the way across down to the yoga and meditation studio. So people will be able to, go on the boardwalk, grab a cup of coffee or a smoothie, or the multifamily walk down, grab a cup of coffee. There's a nice park built in here. So we tried to just take a lot of the things we already had before and work it into the new design. And I'm very fortunate to work with a nationally renowned land planner on this, and he is awesome. And so this is what it is. Oh, let me see if I've got anything else. So we retained our 50% open space. We went from that low density to high density. We're looking at, so this lays out to be about 880 housing units. 730 fall on that multifamily side and are more on the Parmenter side. So you can see it gets a lot denser, as most things are on Parmenter. 150 single family homes that break out along that spectrum of types of homes that we proposed. And then the commercial is there to serve the community and to invite, the rest of the neighboring community in as well. Just for the housing, we're considering this for every age and stage of life, and we feel like we've helped find the missing middle. And so just some of the imagery that we've shared before, this is in terms of multifamily, looking at timeless design. The only thing that this image doesn't really depict is that we've got beautiful view sheds through the multifamily so that you can see through the property and it feels very porous. But we're looking for really timeless design, not luxury, just really well done. So we're not looking to do luxury. However that's defined these days, because I think most of it's called faux luxury these days. This is a look at a concept images in terms of the townhomes, concept images in terms of single family homes, small compact housing that people just love living in. And the reason for us to be compact, that leaves a lot of room for nature and that open space. A sample kind of concept of a shotgun home. This could be like one of the estate homes, just to give a sense for what that might feel like. Stormwater management, again, we worked with Water Resource Management, heard them loud and clear, and I do have a huge respect for this topic, and we want to do multiple levels of stormwater management, not just regional. There will be regional in terms of the ponds, but also at the source on site, and getting everybody involved in the equation. So that there will be, the homeowners will be involved, the builders will be involved, the developer will be involved. This will be part of the HOA. every single house will have its own stormwater management plan. And then it will be built into the HOA covenants that everything is subject to inspection and a robust line item in terms of ongoing maintenance of stormwater management plans. Because it's one thing to build it, but you have to keep an eye on it and you have to maintain it. So our goal is to exceed requirements and exceed expectations in this area. We really do want to be a model, not only for like our development, but other developments, not only just locally, but possibly nationwide as well. So in terms of how that looks with the multifamily and the commercial, looking at again, each one building will be evaluated in terms of looking at blue and green roofs, which I've got an image of in a second, below grade filtration and storage for multifamily sites. Jason, our multifamily architect, is here if he could say something about that in a second. Subsoiling, lots of use of native plants, robust and strategic tree planting. And again, to me, you bake it all into the equation through the HOA covenants and the budget, making sure you have line items to handle all of these things long term. So some people ask, well, what's a blue-green roof? On the left, obviously, green roof, the water comes down, filters through the grass and the growing media and the drainage layer, and then outflows. That helps filter the water, helps slow it down a bit. But then you can take it a step further and do a green blue roof, which then contains a storage area in that area, which helps further slow down the rate of it going out. So I just feel like a lot of roofs are a missed opportunity, both in terms of like solar and stormwater management. And obviously right across the street, we've got a great example of solar with the city buildings right across the street where they've done that. But there are just too many missed opportunities in terms of roofs and impervious and all of that. The bike path, this is just, I'm going to share a couple of images, how this came together. This was unfolding late Friday, Monday morning. I'm back in contact with Mark Opitz, and he was a huge part of helping inform the big bike connection, because it was like, how do we make this that it's just not something we think would be cool for our neighborhood, but how does this really become a connection? And that's where, again, that 10-foot off-road bike path that goes all the way down Bellefontaine to Parmenter, where they can, and maybe Mark wants to say something more about that. He's more eloquent in terms of how this really ties into the regional network, but then pulling that in, and I've got a better image of this in a second, pulling that in from where there is that bike path coming in right off of Misty Valley will guide them up, because they come in, unfortunately, at the 100-foot buffer lane. So we're going to pull them up right away with great signage and an off again. And although there's a road here, the bikes will be off-road, pull them right up so they can come along and enjoy the unfolding beauty of Bellefontaine and the rest of the neighborhood. This is, oh, I thought I had another image of the bike. I must have accidentally got rid of that. I don't know, Mark, if you want to say anything else about the bike path?
No, you've done nothing to add to your eloquence.
Okay. In terms of phasing, I think I've got so I had a better image here in terms of phasing. I apologize. I think when I opened this up, I think I opened my previous version. So really it looks much prettier than this, but this does get some of the data across in terms of how we're looking at the phasing of this. So phase one would pull in some of that multifamily and really give a good taste, a good sampling of a wide variety of the housing. Phase two would pick up more multifamily, help us really complete that intersection. So that intersection at Bellefontaine and Parmenter is going to be awesome, and we want to bring that together quickly. So that pulls into phase two, and then the carriage houses and some of the cottages pull in at that point too, as well as the dog park. So there's a dog park up here. We're also looking at some possibility for a dog park somewhere else, but we also want to make sure we're being respectful of wetlands and stuff. So we're investigating that. Third would bring it third. So third, this might end up being some more of a senior housing situation down here in 3, but then again, picking up more of the cottages and some of these estate homes. I forgot to mention that obviously the stormwater management ponds would be also in phase 1. Phase 4 picks up the rest of Bellefontaine. And then phase 5 is the wild card. So we currently have that as the studio, the inn and the cabins and the farm to table restaurant. And the reason it's a wild card is because I still don't know that we know where the world is going in terms of coming together in large group fashion as it relates possibly to the studio and to the inn. So to me, we're holding this for phase 5 because if with this pandemic or possibly the next, I'm not trying to be a pessimist, but we're trying to look at things realistically. This could, if over time, if this no longer makes sense, this could instead be housing as reflected, that would kind of mirror what's on the northern side of Bellefontaine. So sort of holding that for last. Yeah, and then so our next steps is we're looking to submit our application next week and start the process. We've been at this a long time. And so that's where we're at.
Well, I like your passion, I like your vision, and I like the way you have heard various input from the committees and incorporate into this. This is really great, and yeah, it's awesome. So I would like, I'm very pleased with this, and I am sure other commissioners would agree. We would want this Bellefontaine to be 2-lane, and we don't want to be, really heavy traffic road. So yeah, I like everything that you have here. So I actually admire and appreciate how you have looked at the different aspect, how you could handle the storm water. Many of them are so innovative. Awesome. John Schaefer, then Kurt Paulson. Or I don't know who raised the hand first, but I'm just going to.
I just want to comment because Abby had talked about the other committees, and the Parks Committee did talk about this and see the plan. And I just want to share that they were unanimously in favor of this whole thing. I think having a nice separated parkland and safe pocket, easy access from the whole neighborhood was both really nice, but the way you sort of moved the whole thing away from Graber Pond and put extra space in there, we thought that was also beautiful from a space standpoint. So that committee was very strongly in favor of this presentation. So thank you. I get to hear it twice. That was great.
Thank you, John. Okay, so the next one is Kurt Paulson. Please raise your hand if you like to speak.
Yes. So Kathleen, I think again, I'm really supportive of this development, but I have to be careful what I say. I might lose some friends, but it looks like the Public Works Committee did to your neighborhood what they did to my neighborhood 20 years ago. I live in Middleton Hills, and of course, the Public Works Committee has this fascination with super wide streets and accommodating free flow of vehicles, and so that kind of ruined the design. So I'm sorry to see the original design go, because I liked it. And I'm just going to put down a strong marker that at the SIP stage, I don't care what the MPO says or the travel demand model. We're going to do every traffic calming thing we can think of to slow that traffic down on Bellefontaine. But I like the concept, and I've already spoken positively about it. But I think we just have to say, if we're going to be a sustainable city, we're going to stop thinking of roads as accommodating free flow of travel demand at design speeds, and we're going to start designing streets for neighborhoods and for housing. And that was my rant at the Public Works Committee. So let the reader understand. That probably gave George too much good of copy.
Well, I agree with you, Kurt, and I have started to work with the county that we can have a Highway K as a 4-lane. So that is what we really need to work on, and not to have a Bellefontaine as a 4-lane. That's absolutely not proper. So I think I like what you have said, and let's hope we have a solution that the traffic will use Highway K rather than going through Middleton. And I hope some of the traffic even go away from Century Avenue. Any other commissioners? Randy, Bruce, and then Gretchen. Randy?
Yeah, I want to also be very supportive of the development. I'm excited by it. I honestly was more excited the first concept plan. I like the, you know, the urban park. I understand why it's changed, and you've certainly needed to work with the city committees to you know, to address their concerns, and I think you've done a good job. I had a couple quick questions, just maybe more for my understanding, but I take it that the number of multifamily units has stayed pretty consistent from the original plan. Did the number of single family or townhome properties or units stay the same, or did we lose density there?
There was some shifting as our land planner, Phil Tabb, was, you know, trying to recreate a cohesive plan. So there was some shifting. There is more than what we originally came forward with. So I think originally we had 700 dwelling units. So we have 830 now. And again, how that plays out exactly per style of house, I don't have that in front of me, that those changes, but we tried really hard to hold on to the variety and to stay relatively close to that.
Okay, and then why the use of private streets versus public streets?
I'm going to turn that over to Jason or Bruce.
Go ahead, Jason.
Or Bruce. I don't know if
Yeah, maybe Bruce wants
we could
to.
probably we could start with. I'm the architect, by the way, for the multifamily most specifically, but I've been working with the land planner and Bruce, the civil engineer. But I'll let him start.
Yeah. So I think the biggest part is just to give us just for some flexibility. You know, the private roads in this type of development offer, you know, the way I have it set up for the road, say that's adjacent to those proposed ponds, you know, we've got, it's a 24-foot wide street with a curb and gutter, and then sidewalk adjacent to the back of the curb and gutter. And given that flexibility with how we can create that cross section, given the types of units that we're proposing, I think that it was just going to be I think an easier way to make this work.
So is it the cross section that you're trying to achieve just isn't permitted or within the city standards?
Yeah, the city has, I think, one of 12 that they prefer that are standard, and the one they just didn't, for the most part, weren't going to allow weren't going to allow a lot of flexibility, and it felt a little bit too suburban. So that's why we kind of shied away from that.
We're looking for, you know, some, you know, narrow, intimate, charming streets.
Right.
Amen.
I'm totally.
I can add a little bit to that.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry,
totally
Randy.
supportive of that. I think that's a great goal. I just, you know, as a plan commissioner, I'd rather see the streets be public rather than private. I think that there's just issues down the road, that no pun intended.
The maintenance, yes.
Yeah, just later, there's some issues with private streets in this kind of situation. So if there's a way that we can, if there's a way that you can achieve your design goals in a public street format, I would be supportive of that, but I'm very supportive of your design goals The only other comment I had was, given the densities, if I look at that northernmost street, given the, yes, right there, given the densities there, and I assume that we've got garages that are going to be lining that street. I'm just be concerned about how that's handled in terms of the architecture, because it'd be unfortunate just to have garage door after garage door there.
So I wish I had pulled some of the imagery up of this, but the carriage houses up here, it's the garages that are actually, I know this is, the garages are a beautiful part of the architectural. Think of like a London Mews. So in those cases, the garages, I know garages aren't popular in general, but these will be architecturally stunning with the garage.
And it's going to be a 2-story Mews as well. So you're going to have the upper story that's going to have windows and active uses that overlook the street to give more volume to the building as well.
But it sounds like you've given it some thought already, and I appreciate that. And I just would hope that as it progresses, we see that same kind of architecture come forward.
Thank you, Randy. Gretchen and then Mike Slavish.
Sorry. I have a question about the private streets as well as how they relate to the sidewalks. Will the sidewalks be standard? We have a private road next to us that is impossible for people with walkers, wheelchairs, strollers, and dogs to navigate because of the sidewalks. And being that this is supposed to be so approachable for seniors and all people in the community, I would like to see that the sidewalks be standard.
I'll let Bruce jump in on that.
Yeah. So the way I have that laid out is there'll be a 5-foot sidewalk on each side of the private road.
Okay, great. That's one comment. Number 2 is about the phasing. It looked like the dog park might be in phase 2 and not in phase 1.
I could definitely, like, I'm with you. I mean, I'm a dog person, and right as you were saying that, we definitely could set up like an area for dogs right out of the gates, because people need somewhere to go with their dogs. And that's the other reason we're exploring a maybe more robust area, but also trying to be cognizant of all the different competing uses for land, including just preservation of wetland and stuff. So there's a little bit more homework to do in terms of that part of it, but I hear you loud and clear on just having something right out of the gates for people.
Yeah, especially for the vision of the neighborhood. It would just be really nice for people to just be able to go out and meet their neighbors with their dogs.
Right.
Another thought might be more recreational uses for elderly people, such as an outdoor chess table, something like that, where people who aren't really active in the parks can still get outside, especially like considering the pandemics and things.
Well, a couple of things. So there are, one thing we didn't even get into is even in the multifamily and maybe even senior housing down here, but all of the different courtyards are going to be put to a lot of unique uses that are everything's going to be very porous. So the people from the rest of the community can come into the multifamily courtyards, and the multifamily is using the rest of the site as well. And we've built in some different green spaces along the way. But this park right here in the upper corner, there's going to be a lot of outdoor pavilions and opportunities to do unique things like that, like whether it's a shuffleboard area or, I mean, there could be some really unique things that happen in some of those green spaces.
And my last question is about the green-blue roofs.
Mm-hmm.
How many of the facilities will have the green-blue roof, and how will that impact other roof uses? Like if a family wanted to have a solar hot water heater or other electric solar or rain barrels, how does that impact the use, and which buildings are they on?
So we are looking at the green and blue roofs for mostly either the multifamily and the commercial buildings. But again, that's going to be evaluated on a building by building basis, because our architects have also, with multifamily buildings have worked with below grade filtration and storage options as well. So that will really work itself out as we get toward the SIP area with that. But I agree with you that there are many examples where you can be doing both. You can have on one section of the roof solar, and on one section, there can be blue and green areas. And I think that those finer details are going to come into fruition as we get further down the process with the architectural details. In terms of the single family houses, so single family houses will be required to have solar.
Okay. Do they have a choice between solar electric and solar hot water? I'm just curious.
Yeah,
just for me.
I don't know. I don't know that yet.
Okay, thank you. I love it.
Thank you, Gretchen. Mike Slavish, and then I thought that I had Kurt, but maybe not. Mike Slavish.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. I too support the development, Kathleen. I think it's beautiful. I love the mix of uses. Just a couple of questions, which are really follow up to ones that were already posed. And Bruce, this might be a question for you. So on the private roads, understand why you're doing it in the concept. As a developer that actually bought a troubled development in Middleton that had private roads, there are other issues. It's not just about the pavement and kind of the feel at the street level. There's also the water and sewer below grade. That if the road is private, then those utilities too are private. And there's really kind of a need to establish a perpetual fund that would be, I'm not sure, funded by the HOA or what, to take care of the water and sewer, because the city will not agree to do that. I believe, I don't want to speak for the city of Middleton, but in this particular development, which was also in the city of Middleton, they would not agree to do that. And it did create quite a bit of angst on the part of those that bought in the development that said, oh yeah, I understand the concept of private roads, but we're not aware of some of the other implications associated with the other utilities that would also be private. Another issue was garbage collection. Trucks on a private road, I'm not sure if the city would actually collect the garbage, if that would be trash and recycling. So just some things, not our issue to worry about. It's for you, I think, to think about if you've not done a development like that. There are a lot of things that may surface and kind of rear their ugly head after the fact, if not kind of thought through on the front end. But other than that, I think the development looks great.
Thank you, Mike. Kurt? Commissioner.
Oh, yeah, I was just going to say in Middleton Hills, the garbage and recycling is collected in the alleys, which are privately owned from the homeowners association.
Okay.
And I think that's true in the alley loaded units in Misty Valley as well.
Thank you. Any Abby Atun?
Yep, in the Public Works Committee minutes from their meeting last night, and I did listen to some of the recording too, they had 8 points that they made. And in the 8th item in the minutes, it said the committee does not object to public utilities within easements in private roads. So I think in this case, the committee at least was open to that.
I read that too, so you're right.
Yeah, good to hear that.
Okay, Randy, you have a hand up?
Yeah, just for whoever might be able to answer this is, Middleton Hills' streets, I believe, are public. The alleys sound like they're private, but the streets themselves, do they meet the typical city standards, or were those special approval?
I can.
Yeah.
So that was back in the mid-90s when the city approved those. That was before the city adopted revised road standards. And so they were approved on a one-time basis, but with the condition that they not have on-street parking, or that they be one way when they are narrow. So for example, John Muir Drive, is a one-way street with parking on one side. Black Cherry Lane is a one-way street with no parking. Prairie Glade is a two-way street with no parking. And so the reason that happened is because the city wanted to maintain a minimum width of a certain width to accommodate emergency vehicles. So to answer your question more concisely, those standards do not reflect the standards that were adopted by the city in the early 2000s.
It's just, those streets seem to work and do provide a, a very, very nice feel. And here we've got a developer that's now being maybe pushed to go to a private street format, which really I'm not sure is in the best interest of the public as a whole. So I don't know, I'm getting on my soapbox a little bit that maybe we need to have a little more flexibility with street standards.
There are a number of public streets in Madison near West Side and on the Isthmus that are two-way streets with parking on one side, where two cars cannot pass each other without one person pulling off. And that seems to work. I'm not aware of any, I'm not an expert on Madison streets, but I just have observed that what you're describing, Commissioner Bruce.
So Abby and Mark and the others, is that something which we need to work on?
Well, I would just note that the 12 cross sections that the city has available now that the Public Works Committee generally recommends were revised just within the last few years, if I'm remembering that correctly. And they have tried to come around to some narrower pavement widths, and they're starting to move more in that direction. In fact, last night at the Public Works Committee, some of the committee members were recommending that Serenity Street, which is the other public street that's being proposed, the north-south public street. And I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. Sorry, Kathleen.
Yep.
But that one actually only be built at a 20-foot wide pavement width. And right now, I think the total right-of-way width is shown at
50.
50. Thank you. So I think, and I did hear some support from the Public Works Committee members in even in, the narrower cross section for Bellefontaine. I think that they just are waiting to get the data to support it. But I think that there's definitely some interest there.
Excellent. Randy, you have further questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Okay. Does anybody else would like to provide input to Kathleen? As I said earlier, I'm fully supportive of it. She has done an outstanding job. She really listens to the staff and the committees, and looks great. So I'm sure with all, she will listen to all this input and think about the private versus public roads, and maybe city can also look into it and provide the kind of roads which she would like. So if there's a, Kathleen, do you want anything more, or are you happy?
No, I think the biggest outstanding issues we're just waiting to hear on Bellefontaine, which is obviously a very important issue for us on multiple levels. So, but we know that it's a process and that it's being worked on.
Yeah, well, we will, my opinion and the other commissioners, 2-lane, don't want 4 lanes. So we'll see where it goes, but that is, and I hope I'm successful in getting Highway K 4-lane, that process started. So that will hopefully take care of it. Okay, so any commissioner wants to provide final input before we say motion to adjourn?
I was just going to say, I appreciate the ADUs. I don't think that was in there last time. That's a nice addition.
Thank you.
Mayor?
Yeah.
Just one item to note, District 2 Alderman Robert Burke had a discussion with me about the cross section and the alignment for Bellefontaine, and noted that it ultimately will be a policy decision of the city council to decide what that future cross section should look like. And he expressed some concern that he feels like the Public Works Committee and the Plan Commission at some point are going to kind of have it out on what that road design looks like. And while we are still waiting on the travel demand model information from the MPO, he suggested that the concept be referred to the city council. And I would note that that's not typical for concept review for it to go to the common council. That was his suggestion. And so I included a recommendation that if the model information is available, then this item could be referred to common council, but that's at your discretion.
But we don't have that information available now, right?
That's correct. We do not have it yet. I did hear from staff at the MPO and CARPC today to clarify some information with the city, and we got the information back to them. So it's possible we'll get it very soon, but we don't have it yet.
Can we make a motion that it just be referred to council for guidance on the policy issues regarding Bellefontaine, and direct staff to wait to put it on their agenda until you have the travel demand model or the MPO information?
Would that affect our timing of submitting the GIP application?
I don't think so. No. And I would like to hear the developers' feedback on whether that would be helpful for the concept to go to the common council, with the understanding that it would not delay the GIP submittal or review date at all. The one point where I could maybe see waiting is that the council might decide that they want more information from the Public Works Committee and the Plan Commission based on what the model says. So I guess I'll leave it to the commission's discretion with input from the developer on that.
I think maybe let's not add another parameter here. And let's wait until we have the data, and then we can go from there.
And
Is
can
that
we make,
okay with the-
can we make sure that if council wants to discuss something, they have the right just to put it on their agenda?
Yep.
Without us having to wait 2 weeks for us to approve recommending it to them. So
Yep.
And
Any
so
council
then,
member can ask it to be put on the agenda.
Yeah. So then I would make a motion to approve the revised concept.
Okay, okay, I will go ahead and second it.
Schaefer seconds.
Okay, Schaefer seconds it. So any further questions or comments? Okay, all those in favor of the motion of the revised concept, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Kathleen and the whole team, superb job.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
Yes, thank you. Okay, need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Need a second.
Second.
I think I would like it here, and that's a good thing. Okay.
Heard the motion
I
from
second
Schaefer,
it.
right?
All those in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye. I think I said.
Anyone
I
opposed?
think it was Slavich. Yeah, Mike.
Or Slavish, whatever.
Okay.
There's a
Okay,
delay.
Slavish seconded, so.
All right. Good night, all.
Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Okay.